Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 379, Standard German Nobility. Really? Dear Mr. Strauss, I think you should be able to give me some specific examples. After all, during the nearly 20 years that you have been in charge of the German Ministry of Magic, you have always been well known for your focus on facts and rigorous work. Even the time of your meeting must be accurate to the second. It is impossible for it to be an internal meeting of our organization. Just sit there and talk nonsense. The facts given by an idiot will always be better than the rhetoric of a genius. I remember this is your motto. The moment the old man finished speaking, Lian Wang immediately spoke up. While saying this, the young man kept observing the changing expressions on the face of the old man named Strauss and the expression on Karl's face, who was sitting at the top seat. Naturally, Karl's expression didn't change. He knew very well that it was not time for him to leave, yet as the leader of an organization, generally speaking, when holding a meeting, in addition to the opening speech and the closing summary. Generally speaking, there is no need to make too many speeches. You must act as a judge. At the very least, one must appear to be impartial and not biased towards any party, and the final decision is only because one is convinced by one party. And Karl is playing such a role now, sitting in a high position in silence. The old man named Strauss had a solemn expression on his face. He was a very burly old man. The silver white hair was combed meticulously and lay neatly on the scalp. His face was strong and his skin was slightly pale. Time had left deep marks on his forehead and eyes. Under the thick eyebrows are a pair of sharp eyes that sparkle with wisdom, but also reveal a bit of stubbornness and conservatism. The clothes he wore were also very distinctive compared to the banquet tuxedos worn by other attendees. The clothes on this old man looked more like a military uniform. A well-tailored black double-breasted trench coat with delicate gold embroidery looks solemn and elegant. The collar of the white shirt was fixed with a ruby brooch, which made it sparkle. Around his waist was a heavy leather belt with a coat of arms that symbolized the family's honor. About 10 centimeters away from the right hand, there was a pair of dark leather gloves. The exposed fingers were slender and strong, as if they could control everything. The reason why Karl could judge so accurately was because the other party used his magic wand and the monocle he carried with him. They were all placed next to his hands, with the spacing between them almost exactly the same. Just from these details, one can feel the aura of the meticulous, old-fashioned, and conservative old German aristocrats, just like fermented sauerkraut. It comes straight towards you. As expected, just as Karl expected. After a moment of silence, the old man turned to face Karl, folded his right hands across his chest, bowed his head slightly and said, "Dear Madam, my speech may take a long time, about 10 minutes and 29 seconds. Considering the importance and urgency of this meeting, I would like to ask for your permission before I speak, to ensure I have enough time to fully articulate my point of view." Karl couldn't help but take a breath, and suddenly felt that today's meeting would not be as simple and smooth as before. Compared with the people in front of them, those pigs in the British Ministry of Magic were as naive as college students who had forgotten what they learned in high school. This was truly a high-end game, so he continued to remain silent and just nodded silently to show his consent. After getting the approval from the top leader, Mr. Strauss turned his determined gaze towards the other people present. Putting both hands on the table and leaning forward, this small action was obviously carefully planned. It can make his already burly body appear even more oppressive. At the same time, it strikes a good balance and does not give people a sense of unreasonable aggression. Gentlemen and ladies, as soon as he opened his mouth, the feeling of an old politician came over him. His voice was low and majestic, and every word he said seemed to be spoken after careful consideration, with an unquestionable sense of authority. Originally, what I'm going to say next should be elaborated in a summary meeting, or a report meeting, but because of Mr. Wang's fatal accusation, I have to make this report in advance. I would like to express my loyalty to everyone present at this meeting, and more importantly, to the honorable lady. As he spoke, He did not lower his head, but just swung his arm lightly and accurately grabbed the wand he had placed next to him. Then he waved his hand lightly, and a curtain of light appeared in front of everyone. Above are 4 statistical charts and some simple text introductions. These 4 charts are the result of our recent work. I just stepped down from the position of Minister of Magic in Germany a month before Christmas this year. During this time, I used the convenience of my position and all available resources to conduct an extensive and in-depth investigation. Look here, Mr. Strauss used his magic wand as a pointer, pointing at the data and pictures on the screen, and began a detailed anatomical and logical analysis. The analysis of the old man is very accurate and full of mathematical beauty, including every punctuation mark and every change in the broken line. He gave his own understanding and logical deduction of the possible meanings behind them. As you can see, in the major European countries, especially in the 13 countries of the European Economic Community, most wizards are opposed to a thorough violent revolution. The median percentage of those opposed is expressed as a percentage. All of them are over 63.7%, with Spain, France, Luxembourg and the Netherlands having the highest opposition rates, all exceeding 70%. So, I think that extremely bad actions are not justified, and we should fight a limited struggle through legal means. And according to the last report, I'm very confident that the Saints organization can obtain legal status before the deadline of August 8th next year. At the same time, the data in the report also strongly supports my point of view. After saying this, Mr. Strauss took out a pocket watch from his coat pocket and looked at the time on it. He said it expressionlessly with the dry humor that is unique to the Germans. 9 minutes and 32 seconds. It seems that the 57 seconds of applause time I booked earlier was a bit too optimistic. It seems that I didn't get the praise I thought I would get. After hearing these words, everyone present couldn't help but shiver. These words were even colder than the cold wind blowing outside the window. An awkward atmosphere began to spread until Karl, who was sitting in the first seat, started to applaud with an expressionless face. Hesitant and sparse applause broke out in the entire reception room. The already awkward atmosphere became even more awkward, and this happened 5 minutes after Mr. Strauss spoke. No one spoke anymore. After all, although this old man was embarrassing, the words and data he spoke were still valuable. At least it seems impeccable now, and there seems to be no angle that can refute it. Seeing that the situation was at a stalemate, Karl could no longer continue to act as the arbitrator and had to step down himself and look at Mr. Strauss standing aside. He asked politely but with dignity, "Mr. Friedrich von Strauss, your report is so perfect that I can't seem to think of any reason to refute it, but I still have one last question. Can you tell me before the deadline I set, what is the probability of the Saints organization obtaining legal status? Can it reach 100%? Chapter 380 65.49%, 95.75%. In fact, this is already biased, because what Karl asked is actually a pseudo question that cannot be answered. There is no such concept as 100% in the world. It is a concept that only exists at the mathematical level. Once specific things enter real life, countless complex situations will more or less affect the final probability of success. Saying such things has actually seriously affected Karl's prestige as a leader, but there is no better way at the moment. In fact, he doesn't know anything about the Saints organization left by his wild father, unlike knowing about the British Ministry of Magic and the American Magical Congress. Both organizations have detailed and abundant information for you to check out. Relying on the super large data processing capabilities brought by the memory palace in my brain, I only need to simply review the information. You can know the life details and growth experiences of everyone in the British Ministry of Magic and the American Magical Congress. Then, with this information, we can come up with the optimal solution for each person. But this Saints organization is really too mysterious. Ever since his adult father and biological mother got divorced, all the information of the entire organization completely disappeared across the entire European continent. Whether it is the Ministry of Magic of various European countries or the information hidden within each family, all information about this organization disappeared without a trace. Even the first meeting in Berlin included the list of people invited and their information. They were all written by my wild father, based on his memories, and on the spot, so most of the people invited are elderly people who are still alive. Now when facing their sons or grandchildren, the information they have is even less. Before, Mrs. Joseph provided me with information about almost all the participants in that secret room. The records were fairly detailed, so I wasn't completely in the dark at the beginning of the meeting. There is nothing wrong with various allusions and metaphors, but in that document, the oldest person present was Mr. Friedrich von Strauss. Apart from the name, the rest of the information is basically blank. When he saw this, Karl already had an ominous premonition, and now the premonition has become reality. The old man in front of him is his biggest obstacle at the moment. It's impossible to reach 100%. While Cole was still recalling, Mr. Strauss finally answered, his voice still full of lowness and majesty. It's just that his attitude became much more respectful, and not as oppressive as before. According to my careful calculations, it's about 65.49%. 65.49%. Karl repeated the number loudly, his tone sounding very unfriendly. But in fact, he was already smiling from ear to ear in his heart, because such a precise numerical answer had verified his first guess. That is the old man in front of him, a very powerful opponent, who will definitely not agree with his point of view easily. But at the same time, he seems to have a fatal weakness, which is that he is too professional and precise. Like a mechanical watch that never makes mistakes, he will only honestly report the number he thinks should be reported, based on his own calculations. Taking advantage of this bug, Cole planned to turn himself into a magnet to interfere with the operation of the opponent's mechanical watch. So he tapped the table rhythmically with one hand, his face full of cold expression, his eyes fixed on Mr. Strauss in front of him. Dear sir, this number does not seem to be satisfactory. The information you collected before is very interesting. I am very grateful for the efforts you and those behind you have made, but at the same time, I want to say this. What I need now is a result that can make people excited, not a string of numbers that make people uncomfortable. Carol's words were already a reproach, and they were quite harsh. If they were ordinary saints, they certainly would not dare to refute after Grindelwald's heir had said such words. But it is clear that Mr. Strauss is not an ordinary person. There was basically no change in his expression. He just spoke calmly. Dear madam, in political activities, if there is a 10% chance of success, you can already take a chance. A 20% probability is already a small advantage, and a 30% probability is already significant. 65.49%. Basically a sure win. Oh, really? Karl laughed, and his beautiful face became a little hideous because of the smile. When everyone present saw this scene, they all held their breath unconsciously and stared closely at the smiling devil on the top. Start to worry about what the other person will say next, and according to Murphy's law, the things you worry about most are often the most likely to become reality. As expected, everyone present only heard Carol asking coldly, then, I would like to ask, dear Mr. Strauss, when you joined my grandfather's group and became one of the first batch of saints, what is the probability you calculated? As soon as the words fell, everyone's face turned grim, including the international law named Li and Wang. All those two unlucky guys who were almost having a stroke and almost fainted on the spot due to the confrontation with each other. Or maybe the others who had been watching the show. Even Mrs. Joseph lost the professional fake smile she had always maintained on her face. This question is too fatal. If it is not answered well, let alone whether today's meeting can reach a satisfactory result. I'm afraid that serious problems will soon arise within the Saints organization. Everyone held their breath, and only Karl still had a smile on his face. He certainly knew that asking questions like this was very risky. But he also understood, according to the ultimate secret of children's quarrels, when he encountered a player who was completely impossible to deal with. The best way is to use the excuse of being the bad guy and threaten to go home and ask the other party's parents to deal with them. It is obvious that this wild father of mine is still very intimidating. Silence fell again, and it lasted another long 5 minutes, but the one who broke the awkwardness this time was Mr. Strauss, who had caused the awkwardness last time. His expression remained unchanged as he spoke in a deep voice. 95.75%. Dear ma'am, that was my answer. When I first met your great-grandfather, I got this number in my mind instantly, but I just didn't expect that with such a high probability of 95.75%. You still failed in the end. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 381, The Truth That Will Never Be Admitted. Karl answered for the other party, and the answer he gave once again brought silence into the cabin. Everyone present turned their eyes to Karl, who had a relaxed expression, and Mr. Strauss, whose expression finally showed a slight change. The deep and dignified old man finally showed another expression besides calmness on his face. It looked like a hint of anger and disappointment. His whole body was tense, like a big cat lying in ambush in the grass, ready to pounce on its prey at any time. Finally, after a long wait, the big cat began to move, but this time, it did not pounce on its prey like it did in the past. He just walked out of the bushes silently, growling a few words softly. Mr. Strauss said in a helpless tone, "Yes, just as you said, I never thought we would lose, regardless of the resources we had at the time, or maybe from a personal charisma perspective. Your grandfather Grindelwald and the organization he founded both have absolute advantages. Even if I calculated it 10,000 times, the data I got would not change at all, but we still lost. We lost miserably and completely. Even now, nearly half a century has passed, I still don't understand why we lost. Maybe the calculation method is wrong." Karl said slowly. "What do you mean?" Mr. Strauss frowned. Karl continued to speak indifferently. "The calculation formula you used earlier should have only selected the number of ministries of magic in the countries you control, and the number of pureblood families who support you, without counting the number of ordinary wizards, especially the large number of mixed blood wizards." Hearing this, Mr. Strauss was silent for a moment, then shook his head decisively. "They cannot influence the overall situation. The changes they can bring about are minimal, and will not affect the final calculation results at all." "That's right." Karl nodded when he heard it, but then changed the subject. "If the resources of a pureblood wizard family with a long tradition are quantified as 1000, then an ordinary wizard may only have 1 to 10. There are even fewer hybrid wizards. If they are scattered here and there, they really won't have much impact, just like potatoes in a sack. But once someone organizes them, the quantitative effect of these extremely small numbers plus their huge number is not a number that can be ignored. And it just so happened that at that time, there was an organizer who was comparable to my grandfather, Albus Dumbledore." Mr. Strauss blurted out the name. Karl nodded silently, confirming the other party's answer, and he found that when he said the name of this old this German old man who looked strict and rigid actually showed rare emotional fluctuations, and his name made him grit his teeth. One can imagine the extent of the anger inside, and this is exactly the effect Cole wanted. He had to use clever words to stir up everyone's emotions. Only then could he slowly erase the rationality from the minds of these shrewd guys. "I can use emotions to manipulate them. As for the theory I just mentioned, it is nothing but a complete lie." Mr. Strauss has been thinking about this problem for half a century, but has not been able to solve it. He will never get the correct answer, because even if there is someone now, tell them the truth and use magic to prove to them that this is the truth. Karl can also guarantee that 90% of people would rather die than believe the absurd truth. The remaining 10% may pretend to believe verbally and then find ways to retaliate when the opportunity arises, because this is an insult to their masters. These senior saints were made to believe that the reason for their failure in their struggle was because their master and the organization's mortal enemy fell in love. That is simply a complete denial of one's past life, and greater interests will become the funniest joke in an instant. So, when Karl used this simple wording to direct the final answer to Dumbledore, the old except for Mrs. Joseph, who was a muggle. All the other smart people present naturally believed this answer. Human beings will only believe what they want to see and believe. What can deceive everyone is never the carefully woven lies, but themselves in their hearts. This absurd psychological saying has been proven once again. Mr. Strauss took the lead first, looked at Carol with an angry expression, and spoke seriously. Dear Madam, we have failed you by not thinking of such an important detail. I was so stupid. I have been troubled by such a simple question for nearly half a century. I solemnly ask for your forgiveness. My grandfather and I have never blamed anyone. Everyone present here, how can we forgive anyone without blame? Karl spoke just as seriously. As soon as he finished speaking, he deliberately pretended to be sad and ashamed, and spoke in a low voice. My grandfather told me more than once that the responsibility for the previous failures was mainly his, and had nothing to do with anyone present here. He failed you, but you didn't fail him. So when I first met you, that's why I say that I'm not asking for your loyalty, but swearing loyalty to you instead. I will always be loyal to this organization. Grindelwald will not let any of you down this time. This time, Karl told the truth, but these facts still played the role of the previous lies. Mr. Strauss was the first to jump out again, with a face that seemed to be made of a whole piece of steel. At this moment, it was as if he was over-calcined in a boiler. The red was dazzling, and his body stood straight. Like an imperial general, he put his hand on his chest and spoke loudly. I will always be loyal to you, my lady. Your will be the direction of my wand. I will give you everything, including your own life. Please tell the master that he has not let us down. He has never let any of us down. It's all Dumbledore's fault. He was absolutely unable to stop us this time. He was unable to stop us from doing this for the greater good. Faced with the other party's sudden loyalty, Karl smiled brightly, but at the same time he was very clear that, although the other party said he wanted to be loyal to him, but in fact, many people present here are not loyal to me at all, and the reason why I can sit in this position is that it's just because of that damn wildfather of mine, that I'm more like an agent of the other parties. The use of this authority is also limited in number, and each use is a huge expense. He must truly control this behemoth in front of him as much as possible. Before using up all his cards, you must produce real results, but you must not initiate the topic. So Karl, as if unconsciously, looked at Mr. Strauss, whose face was flushed, and asked casually, Dear sir, if we calculate now, what is the probability of success of your previous plan? Chapter 382 Unexpected Meeting Content 7.25%. Still without any hesitation, this old man was as precise as a machine. Just like a computer receiving a signal, it gave its answer quickly and accurately. When everyone heard this number, there was a look of surprise on their faces. Even Mrs. Joseph and Carol were no exception. Karl originally thought that the number would drop by 50% at most, and that he would have to work hard to convince others, but I never expected that the probability would be only about 1/10 of the previous one, not even 10%. The unexpected surprise almost made him smile. After he tried hard to suppress the ecstasy in his heart. Karl maintained a serious expression, using the attitude of a leader rather than an interrogator as before. He stared into the eyes of Mr. Strauss and several other people present and spoke in an unfriendly tone, with a success rate of less than 10%. You have planned such a plan in half a year and nearly 200 days and nights. It really opened my eyes. I even doubt that by this time next year, when we go to Berlin with full confidence, when we go to accept the legal status we deserve, we can see a disgusting figure, the Dumbledore who is not named Dumbledore. Maybe they have been waiting for us there, looking at us clowns in the dark with mocking and ridiculous eyes. It's really funny to think about, isn't it? I am ashamed of my behavior. Without any hesitation, Mr. Strauss apologized directly to Karl. When we made this plan, we did forget, or were unwilling to face, the legendary Dumbledore's successor, and according to the information we collected previously, the other party does not seem to have much interest in political power, whether in the British wizarding world, or in the country across the ocean. Dumbledore's heir seems to be more interested in making money. He has no intention of getting involved in political power. He has not even established a real political organization. That's because hearing this, Karl hurriedly prepared to explain, but he didn't expect that he didn't even have time to say his words. Mr. Strauss looked as if he had suddenly realized something, and he smiled bitterly and shook his head. But now it seems that we were too naive. He is just as despicable, shameless, and insidious as his adoptive father. They don't have even a shred of classical chivalry in their hearts, and they don't have the guts to stand up to us head on. They always like to wear a hypocritical mask and pretend that they are completely uninterested in political power. That damn old man is like this, and his successor is also like this, and he is even more despicable and shameless. He even uses the quality of greed to cover up his ambitions. Being called despicable and shameless in person, even Cole would feel a little embarrassed, and he tried hard to maintain his facial expression point in order to avoid being discovered by others. He couldn't help but whispered softly, "There's no need to be so mean, hypocritical or anything like that. Isn't that a bit too much?" But just when Cole was about to explain to his other self, Lian Wang, who had previously served as his vanguard, he suddenly jumped out again and spoke to everyone present with an extremely disdainful tone. "I have already warned you to be wary of the threat posed by Dumbledore's heir. That boy is not who he seems to be, someone who only loves money. Under that extremely greedy appearance, there is a heart that is even more surging and lustful. He uses his strange methods to control the bodies of the fools in Britain with his wealth. He used his appearance to seduce the souls of those guys, just like his adoptive father. He was despicable and shameless to the extreme." Karl's defense was completely broken. The slave-like expression on his face could no longer be controlled. At the same time, he began to complain crazily in his heart. "As for greed and hypocrisy, at least you can admit it, but what about lustful hearts? Who is going to seduce the souls of those guys? You damn French guy, please stop imagining that people from other countries are as lewd as people from your country, okay?" Just after Karl finished complaining in his mind about this international aura, he didn't have time to stop the subsequent discussion point. Mr. Strauss, who had just been at loggerheads with his opponent at the table, immediately stood up and agreed with the other party's point of view for a moment. This strategic meeting on the future development of the Saints organization turned directly into a personal criticism meeting against Karl Hohenzollern. The delegates at the conference, breaking away from their mysterious silent image, began to tell jokes in every language and slang heard on the European continent. Cole was criticized crazily, but within 5 minutes, he found that he had perfectly embodied the 7 deadly sins preached by Christianity. A pervert who is extremely arrogant, jealous, mentally ill, violent, lazy, greedy, gluttonous, and lustful. In this way, they became the image representatives of themselves, the saints who had never been able to unite before. After having a unified target of attack, the barriers between them were miraculously eliminated. The entire organization suddenly seemed much more united, but the price seemed a bit too high. Karl, who was sitting in the first seat, listened to these filthy words. His face, which had been serious all the time, turned extremely dark at this moment. Seeing that these guys were getting more and more outrageous, Karl couldn't help it. He slapped the table hard and roared with all his strength, "Shut up and stop talking." With a roar, the entire audience paused, and the patriarchs of the pure-blood wizard families who were chatting happily together, the other representatives, all looked at each other and then at the furious Karl, confused for a moment. Karl also knew that he had lost control of his emotions and had to say something immediately, otherwise he would be exposed. But there was only anger in his mind. After he finally figured out a clue, a mean voice sounded in his mind. "Congratulations to the host. You have successfully strengthened the unity of the organization at the cost of sacrificing your own image. The Dark Lord just has no shame. Even I admire the host's shamelessness. I must reward him generously. The villain will be rewarded with 20 points. The existing points, please keep up the good work and run wildly on this shameless track. He, you dog system, I'll fuck you. You're fucking gone. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Chapter 383, Judge Kevin Lestrange. The dog system's ridicule truly became the last straw that broke the camel's back. The budding clue and the only remaining rationality in his mind were replaced by a flood of anger. Cole was so busy demonstrating the art of language to the dog system in his mind that he completely forgot about it. In reality, there are more than 10 pairs of eyes staring at me. In less than 10 seconds, many people present began to get restless. At this crucial meeting point, when a leader voluntarily gives up a dozen seconds of speaking time, it often represents a huge power vacuum. Although it may be extremely risky to speak out at this time, it can also bring you great voice if all goes well. Under this huge temptation, one of the two old men who was almost hit by the French international Laura, Lian Wang, almost had a stroke on the spot. He jumped out impatiently, wanting to save the face he had lost before. But the old man didn't even have a chance to speak. A sharp red light suddenly shot out from behind him and hit him directly in the back. What, then? There was a scream that broke through the sky, and the old man fell to the ground, twitching continuously, with his face distorted like a devil. This scream finally brought Carol back to reality and temporarily shifted everyone else's attention away from him. Everyone looked at the old man lying on the ground and twitching, and instantly became alert, and almost everyone took out their wands at the same time. Mr. Strauss spoke bluntly, all directed at a side door on the left side of the reception room. Come out immediately, or I will use the killing curse to kill you. How dare you attack a member of the Saints during a meeting of the organization? This is an offense to Grindelwald. Even if you can escape now, Grindelwald's followers will hunt you down to the ends of the earth. After saying this, the tip of the burly old man's wand began to flash a dazzling green light. Don't get so excited, respected elders. I'm just following the rules of the Saints organization. Punish those who don't follow the rules. As the young voice sounded, a thin and tall figure walked out from behind the side door. Kevin Lestrange, wearing a black Saints uniform, holding his wand in his right hand, came to the old man lying on the ground with an expressionless face. He raised his wand to the other's head and spoke in a cold tone. The Saints' loyalty to their masters must be implemented in every aspect of practice, and the organization's regulations clearly stipulate this. No Saint can make any speech until the master has finished speaking. Otherwise, it will be considered an offense. As a saint, what kind of punishment should I receive for offending my master? I think everyone here knows better than me. Kevin Lestrange's words reminded everyone of the organization they belonged to. It is not a peaceful and docile political organization. It has been a religious organization from beginning to end. An extreme violent organization based on the personality cult of Grindelwald. It's just that with the passage of time and Karl's previous actions, people have gradually forgotten those harsh and cruel rules until now. Looking at the handsome young man in front of him, wearing the ancient judge's robes depicting the symbol of the Deathly Hallows, they only recalled all this when he appeared in front of them with the magic wand. So almost everyone, led by Mr. Strauss, held their wands in both hands and raised them above their heads. He knelt on one knee towards Karl, who was at the head, and apologized in a humble tone. Please forgive our arrogant master. Here we offer our wands with both hands and beg for your mercy. Faced with this sudden situation, Cole was a little confused about everything he knew about this organization. In fact, all of this came from the story told by his wild father. According to the other party, he was simply a standard charismatic monarch. It was because of his unparalleled eloquence and extraordinary personal charm that he attracted almost all the pureblood families on the European continent to cooperate with him. In the process of telling this history, Grindelwald even dissed Voldemort, who only knew how to use violence. At the same time, he even wanted to tell how he relied on his unparalleled charm. In that summer, in that ancient warehouse, the heart of Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard of this century, was completely captured. If Karl hadn't stopped him, the old man would have even been ready to tell the details, but now it seems that the old guy was obviously lying. In the process of establishing the organization, the old guy definitely did not hesitate to use violence. Unlike Voldemort, whose ideology was too disgusting and whose own abilities were limited, he had to keep killing people and use fear to intimidate other people in the organization. It was obvious that the old guy's methods were even more cruel, and he directly engraved the deep fear into the hearts of every believer. It's not that others don't dare to resist, but that they don't want to resist at all. What a powerful method. After figuring this out, Karl couldn't help but sigh. Then he quickly cast a grateful look at Kevin Lestrange. Kevin Lestrange received that look without any change in expression. Instead, Mrs. Joseph, who was sitting on Carol's right, suddenly covered her mouth with both hands, with a surprised expression of a little girl. Looking at that expression, Carol felt his eyes twitching wildly. He silently made a note of Grindelwald, who had secretly betrayed him once again. At the same time, he took a deep breath, adjusted his mood, and looked at the people who were half kneeling on the ground with a calm expression. He waved his hand gently and said indifferently, "You guys get up. I don't want to punish any of you. The situation is so serious now, any internal struggle is a loss, and will only weaken our future competitiveness. I'm still willing to listen to your opinions. As I have stressed before, this is a new era and naturally there is a new set of rules." Karl pardoned everyone present, and Kevin Lestrange didn't seem surprised by this. He just silently put away his wand and pointed at the old man who was still lying on the ground howling. He said with a calm expression, "So, what should we do with this guy? Does he need further treatment?" Hearing this, Karl looked at Kevin Lestrange with a smirk and spoke in a funny tone. "So, what do you want to do, my dear Mr. Lestrange? I would like to hear your opinion." This joking question caused Kevin Lestrange's expression, which he had been trying hard to maintain, to fluctuate for a few seconds, but he quickly suppressed the corners of his mouth, still with a stern face, and spoke coldly. "According to the organization's rules, the crime of offense is the #1 unforgivable crime. When he made that move, his life should have ended, but the lives of everyone in the organization, including me, can only obey your orders. So, the right to decide his fate is always in your hands." Chapter 384, The Cat That Was Hooked. Still as professional and considerate as ever, listening to Kevin Lestrange's response. Karl just felt refreshed. The opponent's rescue was just right. They use the cruelest means to achieve the most gentle goal. The bad guys use him, and the benefits go to the leaders. He is simply a perfect worker and subordinate. So Carol said with a smile without any hesitation, "A very perfect answer, Mr. Lestrange. You are indeed my most capable subordinate. Your answer will be duly rewarded. At the same time, because of your answer, this gentleman can be exempted from punishment. He will be taken away from the meeting, and will not be required to attend the next meeting." Hearing Karl's praise, Kevin Lestrange's whole demeanor brightened up several shades. Although his face was still tense, it was obvious that he had tried his best to maintain his expression. But the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise slightly. Looking at this usually arrogant guy, he was trying hard to hold back his laughter. Carol couldn't help laughing first, and his clear and pleasant laughter echoed in the conference room, shocking everyone present. Maybe Karl didn't know how bright his smile from the heart was. It was only later, when a saint turned to the meeting report recording this meeting, that he saw only the following description. That smile was like the rising sun, lighting up the entire palace. The corners of her eyes were slightly raised, as charming as a crescent moon. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, revealing her white teeth, like a blooming white lotus. Her smile revealed a hint of playfulness and charm that made people fall in love with her. The laughter was clear and pleasant, like a clear spring flowing in the mountains, or like the sound of nature lingering in the air. There is an indescribable charm in her laughter that makes people intoxicated and forget the troubles of the world. It was not until that moment that I felt for the first time that there was no unbridgeable gap between her and me. She was no longer a light that could only be felt but not touched, but became a lovely girl that could actually be touched. The adjudicator of the meeting, Kevin Lestrange, recorded the meeting. However, compared to what Kevin Lestrange was thinking at the moment, Karl only felt a little embarrassed. He quickly restrained his smile and became serious again. He pointed his finger at the old man, who was still howling on the ground, and spoke calmly. "Okay, please take this gentleman out of this meeting room. We have something else to discuss." Hearing this, Kevin Lestrange came to his senses, coughed twice to cover up his embarrassment, and prepared to carry the old man out of the meeting room. As a result, as soon as he got started, Karl said with a smile, "I'm not asking him to leave, but I'm not asking you to leave, Mr. Lestrange. You stay and stand beside me. Boom. Originally, when he said this, he wanted Kevin Lestrange to use magic to throw that guy out. There was no need to do it myself or leave the scene, but I didn't expect that. As soon as I finished speaking, I heard a loud bang. The old man, who had just been rolling on the ground and howling like a ghost, flew straight towards the open side door like a cannonball. Then he fell heavily to the floor and fainted, not knowing whether he was dead or alive. Then the door was closed considerately. Seeing this scene, everyone present looked in surprise at Kevin Lestrange, who walked to Cole with his head lowered. He sighed that this boy was really cruel, and only Carl discovered that his cat's face seemed to have a fever. When I was petting the cat just now, I seemed to have used a little too much strength, causing the cat to have a stress reaction. That poor old man. The master played the role of the ball of hair that got kicked. But there was no time to feel sorry for the old man. In order to help his cat cover up the embarrassment, he also wanted to speed up the meeting. Carl immediately changed the subject, looked at Mr. Strauss, and spoke seriously. Okay, Mr. Strauss, let's end this temporary episode here and discuss the next goal of the Saints organization. Hearing this, Mr. Strauss quickly turned his gaze away from Kevin Lestrange. The expression on the face of this old-fashioned and serious German man was only embarrassment at this moment. He is the kind of person who likes to proceed step by step in everything and slowly get things done through rigorous calculations and strong logical reasoning. In his opinion, everything has logic, and completing a task perfectly, like solving a math problem, has a unique beauty of numbers. But everything that happened today was far beyond the scope of what he could handle with the methods he had used in the past. At this point, he was no longer able to offer any useful suggestions. After hesitating for a few seconds, he decided to tell the truth and said respectfully to Karl, "Dear young master, please forgive my incompetence. I hope you can help me solve my doubts through your answer just now. After these unexpected events, I can no longer seem to offer any effective suggestions. I cannot make a satisfactory judgment on the current situation, so you may need to solve this problem on your own." Hearing this, Cole was so happy that his heart burst into blossom. The other party's words basically meant that he had given up the right to make decisions on this meeting. As long as you can come up with a logical plan, it will basically be approved. Then the purpose of holding this meeting has been achieved. Although the process is not perfect, the result is the most important point. So he pretended to think for a few seconds and then spoke deliberately cautiously. "Why do we have to be the bad guys? Can't Dumbledore's heir be the villain?" As soon as these words were spoken, expressions of confusion reappeared on the faces of everyone present, and they looked at each other as if they had heard a fairy tale. And Karl continued to speak in a persuasive manner. "I would like to ask everyone present to think about a question, which is what Dumbledore's heir is doing now. What is the probability that wizards in continental Europe will accept this? The other party wants to embed the entire wizarding community into Muggle society like a deer. Turn all wizards into laborers in his factory and make us sell the magic we have in our hands. Become a worker on a Muggle assembly line, producing the magical products he invented, and finally use those products to carry out reverse economic kidnapping of Muggle society. Let the entire wizarding community become a class with unique monopoly resources and exist peacefully in Muggle society. What do you think is the probability that ordinary wizards will accept this method?" Chapter 385 Karl is bullied by knowledge. 27.5%. Mr. Strauss was silent for half a second and immediately gave his answer. Hearing this answer, a hint of imperceptible dissatisfaction flashed across Carol's eyes, and he asked in a low voice, "Why? Can you give a reasonable explanation? After all, this plan sounds pretty good. It seems like everyone can benefit from it, and there's no need for war or other violent conflicts." "Of course," Mr. Strauss said seriously without hesitation, "this place does sound nice, even in some ways. If we exclude the condition of cooperating with Muggles, this plan would be very suitable for us, because his plan will be of great benefit to the pureblood wizard families who already have a lot of resources. With that, Mr. Strauss began again his previous logical performance, using his magic wand to project a curtain of light in front of every one point on the fluorescent blackboard. He began to write and draw non-stop lines of data and statistical curves just like a program written into his brain in advance. It was presented to everyone smoothly. Look. Here, Mr. Hohenzollern's plan will slowly connect the wizarding world with Muggle events. This will lead to a very direct phenomenon. The commodities that were once ubiquitous in the magical world will begin to become scarce and their prices will rise rapidly. For example, the prices of raw materials for some potions that treat common diseases were originally very stable, because the total number of wizards is limited. The inherent demand and market have already locked in the price ceiling for these raw materials, but if they are integrated with Muggle society, then this market will expand hundreds or even tens of thousands of times in an instant. It is conceivable what kind of terrible wealth this will bring, and the way these wealth are produced, in addition to the magic of ordinary wizards, is the mountains and fields controlled by those noble families, as well as the shops all over the world. In the past, the wealth of a pureblood wizard family might be no more than the total wealth of hundreds of ordinary wizards, but in the future, the wealth of a pureblood wizard family may be equal to the total wealth of all ordinary wizards now. Naturally, these words caused a shock in the entire audience. Several patriarchs of wizard families could not help but have golden lights in their eyes and lowered their heads to whisper to each other. Others joked with each other. It seems that Dumbledore's successor really came up with a good idea. That damn old man Dumbledore has been advocating equality among wizards all his life. I didn't expect that the heir he chose would be such a genius. This is what it means to live too long and do too many bad things and finally get retribution. Although the voices of these discussions were not loud, they sounded a bit harsh to Karl. After all, he had promised a certain idiot who was still making a fuss. I do all this not just for pure profit. There is also a little bit of ideal in it. But now it seems that I was a little too idealistic. So Karl, who refused to give up, defended himself to Mr. Strauss as calmly as possible. I admit that the data you just provided is indeed very convincing, but in this process, the total wealth of the entire wizarding world will also increase several times, and the average wizard's income will be much higher than it is now. It will also be a very significant improvement, so they shouldn't object. Hearing this, Mr. Strauss just shook his head calmly and said with a wry smile, "My dear lady, from my personal point of view, I'm not very opposed to this plan, because compared to the current magical world, which has not changed for hundreds of years and is almost stagnant, although this plan cannot be called perfect, it can indeed push the wizarding world one step forward. But even if it's progress, not everyone is willing to do it." What a ridiculous idea. Karl frowned and said in a bad tone, "The pursuit of progress, the pursuit of knowledge, and the pursuit of change are not only the qualities of wizards, but also the qualities of all human beings. It is also one of the most important ways that humans differ from animals. How could anyone refuse to progress and refuse to move towards a better life?" Hearing this, the bitter smile on Mr. Strauss's face deepened a little. He had been waiting since the meeting started. The old German man, who had always been a leader and full of rigor, competence and strength, now had only helplessness in his eyes. He looked at Karl, shook his head slowly and asked, "My dear young lady, I believe that you must be, unlike other wizards of noble birth, completely ignorant of Muggle society. At least you have a basic understanding of Muggle society. Then I want to ask, that society has undergone tremendous changes in the past 200 years. The subject called science almost dominates the current Muggle society, with all their bizarre inventions. The framework and foundation of today's society is almost entirely based on science. But why? Why do so many people still believe in religion? Why are there still many of them who are unwilling to touch their modern scientific products? There will even be many organizations that are anti-scientific and anti-rational." This question completely stumped Karl. This was the first time he was stumped by a wizard since he entered the magical world. In the past, He was the only one who used the knowledge he had mastered to bully his lovely classmates. I never thought that one day I would turn around and bully another person intellectually. Point in an instant, his brain went blank, the memory palace started working at full power, and his entire brain turned into a supercomputer. I started trying to solve the problem I encountered, but it was obvious that I had hit a bottleneck in the problem solving process. Mr. Strauss on the other side looked at the stunned Karl, just smiled, and then spoke. There is no need to think that way, my dear lady. This question may seem complicated, but it is actually very simple. That is, the new era is not necessarily better. What do you mean? Cole was still a little confused, including everyone else present. Point they all looked at the grey-haired old man in front of them with the same puzzled look. Point feeling everyone's gaze. Mr. Strauss straightened his back and gave everyone an awkward yet polite smile. Point then he spoke in the tone of an elder reminiscing. You know, I'm already very old. Chapter 386, Marks of the Magical World. Mr. Strauss. As soon as he finished speaking, a strong smell of old age almost filled the entire venue. Point the expressions on everyone's faces changed from confusion to embarrassment. However, they all respected and trusted the old man in front of them. Point no one interrupted. Everyone continued to stare at Mr. Strauss silently, waiting for his next speech. Point as a result, they waited for a full minute. Just when everyone was puzzled, and Cole was about to ask the other party why he didn't speak. Point Mr. Strauss suddenly said with a lonely look on his face, I calculated that after I said this, I should get some good-natured ridicule, but it didn't happen. Why is that? Hearing this, everyone present couldn't help but gasp, and at the same time, felt a deep admiration for the German's rich sense of humor. But soon, everyone began to admire Mr. Strauss's work ethic even more. Point the old man, who had a look of embarrassment and dejection a minute ago, turned back into his previous serious and professional self the moment he raised his head. Point he continued expressionlessly. In the past nearly 80 years of my life, I have lived from the beginning of this century to the end of this century. When I was born, the Muggle ruler of that land was still the German Emperor Wilhelm II, and now that country has just completed its unification. I have witnessed too many things on this continent, all kinds of historical events that are written into their textbooks. The First Industrial Revolution, the 2 World Wars. I even have several books on quantum mechanics signed by Werner Heisenberg, especially after 1945, with the defeat of my master, I began to hope more and more to find a new path from another world. But as time went by, I just felt more and more desperate. As he spoke, the light screen projected in the center by Mr. Strauss began to change along with his words. The content on the light screen, like a historical documentary, began to interpret everything that had happened on the European continent in the past 80 years. With the invention and application of the steam engine, factories sprang up everywhere, railways crisscrossed the country, the urbanization process accelerated, and a large number of rural people flocked to cities in search of job opportunities. During this period, chimneys stood tall and machines roared across the European continent, which was the most vivid portrayal of the industrialization process. Then there was artillery fire and air bombs everywhere. The progress brought about by the Industrial Revolution began to be displayed before the public in the most cruel way. Then came the establishment of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, marking the beginning of European integration. In the following decades, the European Economic Community and the European Atomic Energy Community were successively established. Europe began to revive, and cities that had been razed to the ground by artillery fire began to bear bright and beautiful buildings again. Finally, the focus was on a building where an ordinary white-collar worker was sitting in a narrow workstation. He stared at the computer with lifeless eyes, tapping the keyboard mechanically to work. Next to him is a picture of him as a child, running through farmland in France. Is this new era really good? Mr. Strauss's tone at this moment was filled with a calm sense of death. He looked up at the light screen in front of him with lifeless eyes, looking extremely lonely. Now, everyone in the Muggle society is praising the greatness of the new era, saying that there will be no more wars in Europe. It's just nonsense to me that everyone can live a happy life. In my time, Muggle youths could run in vast fields and enjoy art in opera houses, even if they had no money. Jugglers on the streets could still provide enjoyable performances. Their material life might not be as good as it is now. Many people have never even seen what farmland looks like, and even naively believe that food will automatically grow on supermarket shelves. They are imprisoned in those small compartments, repeating mechanical and simple tasks in front of those glowing glass screens, watch all sorts of meaningless artless plays, and then lie there laughing like an idiot. Their souls are being slowly devoured by their society. When their society slows down, all their problems will burst out, if they are given a chance to choose their lives again. When they see themselves in the mirror with lifeless eyes and no hope for the future, it seems that we are not necessarily willing to choose to live in a new era. What the hell? Karl couldn't hold it in any longer and uttered a Chinese quintessence directly in Chinese. He stared at the German old man in front of him in amazement. Asked in a mysterious way, "Do you have the magic to predict the future? If not, how did you come to these conclusions?" Hearing this, Mr. Strauss was obviously stunned for a few seconds, then shook his head seriously. "Of course not, my dear lady. Predicting the future through magic has always been an extraordinary ability possessed by your Grindelwald family. Apart from the great Grindelwald bloodline, I have never heard of anyone else in the wizarding world who can predict the future. We came to these conclusions simply through what we personally saw and heard, and the knowledge we have accumulated. In fact, I'm not afraid of being laughed at by many of you. During this process, I even consulted a lot of advice from muggles." Haha. Karl sneered. He actually didn't quite believe what the old man said. He believed that the other party was intentionally concealing the truth about himself. In his opinion, these were the founding members of the Saints organization. Although his attitude towards muggles is not as perverted as Voldemort's, it is only slightly better. It is simply a fantasy to ask them to put aside their pride and ask questions to muggles. Mr. Strauss also noticed this and looked at Cole with a serious expression. "Dear young master, do you think I'm lying to you in such a formal organizational meeting? How could I possibly lie to the person I pledge allegiance to? If I did lie, the Slytherin gentleman behind you should have raised your wand and killed me long ago. You seem to have a very deep misunderstanding of what I just said." Hearing this, Karl seemed even more confused, and he looked up at Kevin Lestrange in confusion. As a result, this guy only looked at her for a second, then immediately turned his head away and spoke in a low voice. "Mr. Strauss did not lie before your grandfather imprisoned himself in Nuremberg in 1945. I have personally assigned several senior members of the Saints, including Mr. Strauss, go to the Muggle world and seek new development paths for the future. This requires doing so when necessary. They should ask the Muggles directly. Didn't your grandfather tell you about this?" Chapter 387. The unexpected true core of the Saints organization. Damn old man. After hearing this, Karl silently made a note of Grindelwald in his heart. Then he turned to look at Mr. Strauss and spoke in a sincere tone. "I'm very sorry, sir. I shouldn't have such paranoid thoughts. I'm ashamed of my behavior. You don't have to apologize." Hearing this, Mr. Strauss said sincerely, "I know that for you who inherited Grindelwald's bloodline, it is very difficult. It does sound unacceptable to lower your noble head and ask those lowly muggles for advice. I said that before only to prove that what I said was true. I didn't mean to change the supremacy of wizards. There is no need for you to apologize to us or thank us for our so-called sacrifice, which is such an unbearable humiliation. This is the punishment for losers like us. We just have to bear it ourselves." Hearing this, Carol couldn't help but take a breath, and at the same time, glanced at the other people present. Sure enough, on the faces of several saints who were also older, I saw that kind of lonely and resolute expression. He couldn't help but sigh. No wonder you Germans were willing to form an alliance with those Japanese bastards during World War II. It turns out both nations have a little bit of Chunabaya in them, and this organization that my father left for me does seem to have many talented people in it, but now it seems that its essence is still a little bit abstract and immature. Although conventional methods are effective for these people, in reality, it seems that a strange sense of justice is still needed to guide these guys. Karl figured it out and immediately changed his expression, completely disregarding his current image point, trying hard to look like a helpless leader. He spoke to everyone present with a sad and helpless tone. I understand. I understand why my grandfather has been hiding this from me. I also understand your painstaking efforts. You have been through so much, witnessed too much shameless betrayal, and too much helpless failure of justice. You have seen greater good, and are spurned by your own people, precisely because you have known hell yourself. So, you understand better than anyone how great the sacrifices that need to be made for the greater good are. That's why you came to this meeting to test whether I'm a qualified leader. Sure. Enough. This kind of speech with a strong sense of middle school immediately resonated with many people in the audience. The veteran group headed by Mr. Strassel had tears in their eyes, as if to say that someone finally understood their good intentions. The young and strong group headed by Li and Wan looked ashamed as they looked at the old people with tears in their eyes, and lowered their heads in shame. Karl on the other side had an even uglier expression on his face, but it was not because he was truly moved. It was just because he felt that he was crying because of his own stupidity. The tension and mutual calculations before were really a bit self-indulgent. At the same time, he began to completely demystify his wild father. He suspected that Grindelwald might not rule these guys by any cruel means. Maybe it's just because of his mouth that can make up lies, and that handsome face that can make the greatest white wizard fall in love at first sight. After figuring this out, Karl decided to add fuel to the fire. He slowly looked at everyone present and announced solemnly, "But we are back, aren't we? As ghosts of the old times, we finally rose from the dead. This time we will completely change. In the past, they called us devils, and Grindelwald the most dangerous dark wizard family, but what they don't know is that this time the devil will wear the face of an angel, and we will no longer be the villains this time. Gentlemen, we must take back the fruits of victory that should have belonged to us half a century ago in an upright manner, as liberators and as righteous men." This announcement seemed to ignite the fire in the hearts of everyone present. Then, I don't know who started it, but applause rang out in the venue. Like spring thunder, the applause was not chaotic but extremely uniform. Every clap seemed to have been carefully rehearsed and had a strong sense of rhythm. The applause continued, as if everyone wanted to express their excitement and support in this way. Karl felt the emotions attached to the applause, but as a veteran of the second dimension in his previous life, he knew very well that this was definitely not a climax. I still need to deliver the final blow to end it brilliantly. So, surrounded by applause, Karl, who had just been as strong as an ancient Greek ruling official, slowly turned his head and looked at Mr. Strauss. She asked softly with a sincere and sweet smile, "Dear sir, am I qualified as a leader?" Sometimes, the roar of a mountain or sea may not be as effective as a gentle question. This soft question directly penetrated the inner defense of this German old man, whose face had remained unchanged like marble. Two cramped red clouds appeared, and Mr. Strauss coughed loudly and desperately, as if he was having an asthma attack. After concealing his inner embarrassment and excitement, he immediately looked at Karl seriously and answered, "Yes, ma'am, I think I'm qualified." Karl did not seem particularly excited when he received this answer. He was just like a granddaughter who was praised by her grandfather. She just gave a sweet smile and then sat back in her seat quietly. This scene was so peaceful and beautiful that all the men present, regardless of age, forgot to breathe for a few seconds, so much so that the clerk of later generations saw the following description in the same meeting report. His presence seemed to blend into this peaceful space. His long hair gently draped over his shoulders, rising and falling slightly with his breathing, and his long eyelashes occasionally fluttered. There was a faint smile on her lips, which gave me a few seconds of spiritual comfort in my long life. The crowd that had been fighting before seemed to have seen the real Messiah at that moment. The world around them seemed to have stopped, leaving only the goddess and the crowd looking up at her. Kevin Lestrange records in the living room. Cole was quietly enjoying it all. He knew he didn't need to do anything else. All I had to do was wait silently, and sure enough, after 2 minutes of silence, Mr. Strauss suddenly raised his voice. "Well, now that the lady has given the direction, let's immediately work out a feasible plan based on this direction. From now on, work out the first steps to take in the next 24 hours to help that damn Dumbledore heir to complete his extremely foolish plan that is full of loopholes in the British wizarding world. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 388. From one extreme to another. Without even much explanation, Mr. Strauss simply explained what he had just said. The others present understood what he wanted to express and immediately gave their opinions. The first to speak was Mr. Lian Wang, a French international lawyer who was previously a young and radical member. I think the first step should be to start in France. First of all, the French wizarding world and the British wizarding world have the closest connection, since the Duke of Normandy of France conquered England in 1066. French wizards have begun to migrate to England on a large scale. Nowadays, most of the pure-blood wizard families in the British wizarding world have French wizard bloodlines. It's the same with ordinary civilian wizards. Most of them have relatives in the French wizarding world, and even have real estate and assets. It would be ideal and most effective to take down the French Ministry of Magic first. After giving his own conclusion, Lian Wang felt that he had basically won the battle and his logic was almost impeccable. As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Strauss, a veteran and conservative, immediately jumped out to object. You are still too young. Your thoughts are too naive and your actions are too obvious. I think we should start from the most important place, that is, the German region at the heart of the European continent. I can assure you directly, as long as the meeting makes a decision, within 48 hours, the German Ministry of Magic will be completely under the control of the organization. At the same time, we can also include the Austrian Ministry of Magic. You know, these two places are the two areas with the most concentrated wizard populations in the entire European continent. Having this place as a base will play a vital role in ruling the entire European continent in the future. As he said this, the German old man couldn't help but look at Mr. Lian Wang sarcastically and said contemptuously, "Of course, the most important point is that, as long as we take down the German Ministry of Magic, the French Ministry of Magic will be like a cake that comes with a cup of coffee. The food will be brought to the table by the waiter. We can eat whatever we want. After all, we have been here for so many years. The French Ministry of Magic has never once taken charge of its own affairs." Such a direct milk method made Mr. Lian Wang, the French international lawyer, feel so embarrassed that he immediately retorted loudly, speaking with evidence, "Sir, what gives you the right to say that?" Facing the aggressive opponent, Mr. Strauss remained calm and responded slowly, "I was the German Minister of Magic for nearly 20 years. I know your cowardly minister far better than you do, young man. The times have passed. This is not the time for you to have the final say." Mr. Lian Wang still refused to accept. "I have never had any intention of being a dictator. I will always be loyal to Grindelwald and my organization, unlike some countries where the whole country is full of cowardice." Mr. Strauss was also unceremonious just like that. The old man and the young man started arguing fiercely again, just like they did at the beginning of the meeting. During their argument, the representative of the Greek region acted as a transparent person throughout the meeting. Because Mr. Papadopoulos, a middle-aged man who looked very weathered, suddenly stood up and tried to smooth things over and expressed his own opinion. The opinions of both gentlemen are very useful. There is no need to argue about anything. In fact, we can directly threaten the Presidium of the Wizarding United Conference, ask them to restore the reputation of our Saints organization worldwide, assassinating one or two members of the Bureau in the process, or we can just send someone to England to kill that damn Dumbledore. This is a more direct and reliable method. If your countries can't spare any manpower, I can definitely help. Anyway, the Balkan Peninsula is starting to become a powder keg again. The wizards there have started to flee in large numbers again. It shouldn't be a big problem to find a few powerful dark wizards who are dissatisfied with their lives. What the hell? Karl, who had been sitting in the first seat acting as the mascot, couldn't help but utter a Chinese quintessence in Chinese. Today he finally understood what it meant, that the world was a huge makeshift team, although it was from a personal perspective. People like Mr. Strauss and Mrs. Joseph are definitely extremely powerful people, whether in the magical world or the muggle world. But once a person is placed in a group, and influenced by the group, this person may do all kinds of strange and outrageous things. For example, before, when the meeting just started, in order to protect the property and family interests that he had accumulated over the past half century. As well as confusion about the future and doubts about Karl's personal leadership ability. The entire organization is almost unanimously conservative and does not want to make any big moves, but ever since Karl suddenly took control of the entire organization with a trick that he still can't understand. The attitude of the entire organization was unanimous, and it made a 180-degree turn from being extremely conservative to being extremely aggressive. There is even a strange phenomenon that the former radicals are now being accused by conservatives of being too conservative. The centrists, who have remained silent all along, immediately think that both the radicals and conservatives are trash and that, if they are going to do something, they should do something big. What about the French Ministry of Magic or the German Ministry of Magic? If we want to deal with someone, just go for Dumbledore and challenge the most powerful wizard in the world. The whole thing is a died as it seemed to be in place. Mr. Papadopoulos' magical brain opening plan began to gain more and more support. Karl, who had been silent all this time, had to interrupt everyone again and speak. Dear gentlemen, please do not forget the core purpose we just set. We have to pretend to be good people this time. You can't just come up and do this. Carol couldn't think of any words to describe the extreme thoughts of the people present, and he was stuck there for a long time without saying a word. Finally, it was Mrs. Joseph, who had been watching the show, who spoke with a smile. Creative, offensive moves, that's right. We can't just do this kind of creative attack right away. We have to be as gentle as possible by using violence but not relying on it. We are like a well-dressed lawyer and banker. Use the most polite tone, say the most rude words, and use fear to force the other party to submit. There's no need to assassinate right away. Think about it along this line first. Chapter 389, The True Face of the Saints Organization. Originally, Karl's intention in saying this was just to make the opinions raised by these people a little more realistic. After all, his plan to integrate the British wizarding world had just reached the first crucial step, and he assassinated Dumbledore right away. It would be a huge blow to my other self, and if anyone wants to kill me, they have to wait until I have finished what I have done. Especially that old bee. If he is reluctant to retire, don't blame yourself for being cruel and ruthless and not recognizing him as your mother. But what no one expected was that as soon as he finished speaking, the centrist Mr. Papadopoulos simply sat back in his seat without saying a word and turned back into the role of an invisible man. The two men, Mr. Strauss, were arguing fiercely and had stood up to accuse each other. And the French international aura, Mr. Lian Wang, looked embarrassed and slowly sat back in his seat. For a moment, the reception hall, which had been as noisy as a vegetable market just now, became unspeakably quiet again, with only the sound of wind coming from the open window. Looking at this strange silence, Cole was stunned. He tried to wink at the people he had just met. It turned out that both Mr. Strauss and the others were deliberately avoiding his gaze. It's like a student in class who is afraid of being called by the teacher. The scene remained strangely silent for nearly 30 seconds. Mrs. Joseph, who was on Carol's right, slowly leaned close to his ear and whispered softly, "Don't make it too hard on them, kid. They simply can't do what you just asked them to do." Even Mr. Strauss's previous peaceful campaign proposal, if you read carefully the detailed information he sent to everyone in advance, you will find that it includes a lot of assassinations, threats, kidnappings and other means. Of course, you may not have seen these contents, because those contents are all on the title page of the plan's official content, annotated with 2 or 3 short sentences. Hearing this, Cole was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Mr. Strauss in disbelief. The other party responded with a strange expression, and that slightly aggrieved look seemed to be saying, "You also didn't ask me in detail about the specific content of the peaceful campaign." It was not until he saw that look that Karl understood what his wild father had said to him when he introduced his organization. At that time, Grindelwald also had a strange expression on his face and spoke in a helpless tone. "When you want to lead this organization, kid, you might need to get a little stupid. You can't use your usual way of thinking. My saints always do something incredible. Sometimes they are as quiet as a sheep, and sometimes they are as aggressive as a vicious dog. If you never forget one thing, it's that no matter how fancy they dress, they are still thugs at heart." When he first heard these words, Karl instinctively wanted to resist. Even before the meeting began. He also used his habitual way of thinking to understand and observe his subordinates. So, when he learned from the information provided by Mrs. Joseph that a considerable number of his people supported the peaceful election plan, he instinctively thought that these people had lived in peace for too long and were unwilling to use violence again. At the same time, the deeper reason is to preserve the wealth accumulated by the family during this period. But now it seems that this is not the case. These thugs may simply think that they had set fire to the air defense tower in Berlin before. Although the act of announcing the return of the Saints to the entire magical world was cool enough, not a single official from the German Ministry of Magic was killed in the entire process, so they naturally assume that they don't like violence and are not qualified to be leaders. In response to this unqualified leader who also disliked violence, they immediately came up with what they thought was the most appropriate plan. That is the so-called peaceful election plan. After all, in the minds of this group of thugs, as long as they are not burned to ashes by the fierce fire, things like injuries caused by violent means, group threats and intimidation, and large-scale kidnappings and beatings cannot be considered as so-called violent means. In a word, as long as the other party is still alive, I will not use violence. So, when Karl says that, be like a polite lawyer and banker. After saying this, use the most elegant and appropriate tone, say the most shameless words, and use fear to force the other party to submit. Whether it was Mr. Strauss, the French international law, or other participants, they all became mute. Because this is beyond their capabilities. They don't use magic to torture the other party into a fool, or directly break the other party's limbs, or forcing the other party to drink a horrible potion and turn into a monster that is neither human nor ghost. In addition to these non-violent means, they simply don't understand other non-violent methods that can be used without harming other people's lives, so this silence does not represent opposition. Whether it is Mr. Strauss or the others, it's not that they don't want to do it, but Karl's request is, I really can't do it. After figuring this out, Karl could only sigh helplessly, and then looked at Mr. Lien Wang, who was still lowering his head to avoid his gaze. Directly named, Mr. Lien Wang, I'm here, ma'am. Mr. Lien Wang, whose name was called, trembled noticeably. Even his tone revealed fear. It was conceivable that the question raised by Karl was more difficult for him than Mr. Strauss, this great wizard, who has been famous on the European continent for a long time, and has been the German Minister of Magic for nearly 20 years, would find it more terrible to have a direct quarrel with him. Looking at Mr. Lien Wang, whose body was trembling slightly, Karl could only comfort him gently. Don't be nervous, sir. I won't force my subordinates to do anything beyond their capabilities. I will not blame them for not meeting my standards. I'm not my grandfather, and I don't know you well enough. This is my shortcoming as a leader, so I need your help and insights even more. Together we can make progress and lead the entire wizarding world into a new era. Hearing this, Mr. Lien Wang finally breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly folded his right hand across his chest and saluted, saying respectfully, "Thank you for your understanding. For the greater good, please state your request, my lady." Hearing this, Karl didn't waste any words. After thinking for a few seconds, he asked directly, "Can you invite those high-ranking officials from the French Ministry of Magic to a special place? Theodora Grindelwald wants to treat them to a beautiful dance performance." Chapter 390, For the Greater Good. No, to overthrow Dumbledore. Ah. Hearing this, Mr. Lian Wang's face was full of question marks. He didn't understand what Carol meant by this at all point, but he still maintained the rigorous professional attitude that an aura should have, and asked a supplementary question. It's a normal invitation, right? There's no need to invite the French Minister of Magic and the key leaders of various departments. Use potions to stun the victim or directly control him with magic and physically carry him to a specific location. Just need me to give them a message. At the end of his speech, Mr. Lian Wang revealed a sense of lack of confidence. It is conceivable that the reputation of this French international aura in the field of crime in the European wizarding world is not very good. Karl nodded somewhat helplessly and added affirmatively, "You are right, sir. You just need to inform them. You don't have to use the usual methods. Don't use it." At the end, Karl became a little unconfident and emphasized it again. Upon hearing this, Mr. Lian Wang could only nod awkwardly, but after sitting back in his seat, he couldn't help but ask back, "What if they don't come? I know better than anyone how those insects are afraid of death." Just hearing the last name Grindelwald, some of them are older, like Mr. Strauss. They are likely to be so frightened that they become incontinent at night. If they are just notified, I doubt they will come to participate. So, we arrange for undercover agents to be placed in various departments and invite them using the traditional method, which will have a higher chance of success. Hearing this, Carol's head was blown away, and he said in a firm tone, "Don't worry, sir, they will definitely come, and there is no need for you to deliberately ridicule Mr. Strauss. You just mentioned a detail. They are very afraid of Grindelwald. That's why they must come, because the fear that stays in your mind is more frightening. It will be much better to face the fear, and you can make promises to them. I swear on the honor of the Grindelwald family name that no one will lose their lives in this process." Mr. Lian Wang nodded mechanically, agreeing with what Ka said, but at the same time he added, "If I may, madam, I would like to raise that pledge a little. It has been raised to the point where absolutely no one is injured, just to ensure that no lives are lost. Given the current reputation of our organization, it might not be enough of an attraction for those guys." This time it was Carol's turn to have a face full of question marks. He looked at Mrs. Joseph in disbelief. The other party just nodded silently and responded in a very small voice, "Before you showed up, the organization's operations in Germany and France were already ongoing. Mr. Strauss made many promises, including one that no one's life would be lost." Only Mrs. Joseph was a little worried and looked at Mr. Strauss on Carol's left with her beautiful eyes. Mr. Strauss felt the gaze and spoke with some embarrassment. "It was an accident. It happened during the election for the post of Minister of Magic in Germany. The International Confederation of Wizards has always been dissatisfied with the fact that I, as a senior saint, have been occupying the position of Minister of Magic in Germany, so they joined forces with the French Minister of Magic at the time, as well as various officials and my rivals at the time. They attacked me together. I was alone and powerless at the time, so I could only convene a temporary meeting of the organization and use some non-violent means to ensure my re-election. I just didn't expect that there were some French officials' heads involved in this process." Mr. Strauss looked embarrassed, rubbing circles on his temples with his hands, as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated. Finally, it was Mr. Lian Wang who spoke. "They turned into idiots. About 20 of them suffered severe blows to the brain, and more than a dozen of them were probably insane due to the torture of magic. The 3 chairmen of the International Confederation of Wizards Council all died within a month after returning from that banquet. That banquet is also known as the Berlin Tragedy. That's it." Mr. Strauss nodded awkwardly. Karl's eyes twitched as he listened. He suddenly regretted agreeing to Grindelwald and taking over this damn organization. "I wanted to use this huge organization to support my plan. As it turns out, there is not a single normal person in the entire organization. I was also forced to wear this kind of clothes and put this kind of makeup on my face. Now that I think about it, that damn old guy has never made a business deal at a loss. The treasuries, castles, and possessions which he left to himself were not so much the wealth which he left to himself. It's that old guy who gave himself the spiritual compensation in advance. You wait, damn old thing, I will settle this account when I return to England. After making a note of Grindelwald in his heart, Karl looked at Mr. Lian Wang helplessly and said, you just need to inform them of the news, and you don't have to worry about anything else. Hearing this, Mr. Lian Wang nodded, and after arranging his first step, Karl was in no mood to continue the meeting, so he could only make a brief summary speech. After we take this step, I hope everyone here will implement the spirit of today's meeting, remain restrained and calm, and temporarily put those traditional non-violent means in abeyance. Please remember what I'm going to say next. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember that we are the good guys this time. He is a liberator who is ready to lead the entire European magical world out of crisis for the greater good. After saying that, Karl was ready to adjourn the meeting, but he saw that everyone looked like eggplants hit by frost. They looked at each other in dismay. In fact, if you think about it, you will understand that for these people, after this meeting, many of them no longer feel like their hands and feet are tied. It seemed as if I had lost all my strength and means at once, and facing an uncertain future, I did feel a little confused. In order to boost morale, Karl rolled his eyes and spoke again. To overthrow Dumbledore. These words seemed to touch some strange switch for these guys, instantly cheering them up from their decadence. They all raised their right hands high and shouted loudly, to overthrow Dumbledore. Chapter 391 The Last Guest. It's so damn cold, Karl couldn't help but swear. He was wearing a white haute couture dress, the hem of which fluttered gently in the breeze, like a blooming lily. His shoulders and neck were almost completely exposed, so much so that he was shivering in the cold wind. At this moment, Cole was walking slowly along the stone steps, his goal being the highest tower in the castle. It was already very late, and looking out through the small windows of the castle, all one could see was darkness. Of course, the meeting couldn't have been delayed until this time, that's why it was delayed so late. The reason is naturally common to all countries, the dinner after the meeting. At first, Karl resolutely refused to attend the dinner, especially when Mrs. Joseph took out the somewhat revealing haute couture dance dress he was wearing. He even directly and sternly refused, but he did not expect that Mrs. Joseph, who was rejected, was not angry. Instead, she smiled and asked a question that made him think deeply. Dear lady, have you ever thought about a question when you were brought before the public by your grandfather? He didn't provide any evidence, just a simple introduction, and made everyone believe that you are Grindelwald's heir. Have you ever wondered why this is happening? When Karl heard this question, he blurted out the answer instinctively. That's, of course, because of his identity. He is the dark wizard who made the whole of Europe tremble, and the creator of the Saints organization, Gellert Grindelwald. That name is enough. Karl thought his answer was impeccable, but Mrs. Joseph just smiled when she got the answer. Then he shook his head and spoke slowly. Of course not, kid. Your answer is only 50% correct. You haven't thought of the remaining 50%. As she spoke, Mrs. Joseph stretched out her white right hand, gently stroked Karl's face, and said with emotion, the remaining 50% is because of this face. When you appear in front of those people, everyone will be amazed by this beautiful face. This is enough, because no one will doubt whether you, with such a look, are the real heir of Grindelwald. Even if you deny it, they will definitely force you to believe that you are Grindelwald's heir, because for this group of saints who are incredibly proud, and who are basically mentally ill, their leadership has to be perfect, whether in terms of ability or appearance, it must be unique. When Karl heard this answer, he was completely confused and wanted to deny it. But he suddenly recalled that when he first talked to Grindelwald, he asked him a little unconfidently, "Are you so sure that I can become your heir?" At that time, he wanted to get some certificates, such as exclusive magic, but the damn old man just smiled and said, "I don't need a child. Your face is enough, even though it can only reach 90% of my peak state when I was young, but you are enough. You just need to show your best side, and they will naturally kneel at your feet." When I heard these words at that time. I was completely dismissive, but now it seems that, although that guy's a bastard, he did not lie. So Karl had no choice but to attend the dinner. After all, according to this logic, he had completed the meeting himself. Only 50% of the work has been completed. Attending this dinner and showing myself in front of everyone is the remaining 50% of the work. He always finishes his work. So until this late, Karl hadn't gone to bed yet and was still preparing to complete all his work. As for the content of the job, of course it is to find your dog who ran away from home because of a quarrel with you. Thinking of this, Karl took several deep breaths and tried to suppress his emotions, continuing to walk upwards along the stairs. He soon saw a black figure curled up in the central open space of the tallest tower in the entire castle. This is a space similar to a watchtower, with huge openings on the surrounding walls that allow people to see the scenery outside. Karl looked around and couldn't help but sigh that the scenery here was really nice. His eyes passed through the darkness through the window and he could see the boundless night sky. The twinkling lights are like sparkling gems inlaid on the black velvet. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a silver ribbon, dividing the sky into two. Those distant stars seem to be telling ancient legends, which makes people feel awe. Combined with a small space built with ancient bricks around it, it is indeed very artistic. But these are of no use to Karl now. The only feeling he has now is that it is too cold. The enclosed and open space, coupled with windows for ventilation on all sides, creates a dramatic duct effect. The cold wind kept blowing through the tower like an air conditioner working 24 hours a day, taking away all the heat in the entire space. Karl, standing at the stairs, still felt cold from time to time, even though he used magic to keep himself warm. When a strong cold wind blew, he could no longer hold back and sneezed. Cut. The loud sneeze echoed throughout the space, startling the thing curled up in the center. That massive object shook noticeably and then immediately returned to silence, like a turtle startled by the cry of a seagull. Curiously, it stuck its head out of the shell to take a look, then quickly retracted its body into the shell. Karl saw the whole scene, and his eyes twitched wildly, and he instinctively complained in his heart, "You damn idiot, you're still throwing a tantrum even though I'm freezing. You're such a heartless guy." But no matter how he complained in his heart, Karl still moved towards that object step by step. Not until he walked behind the other person did he reluctantly stretch out his toes and kick the other person's butt, muttering softly at the same time, "Can you please not be so fragile? Why are you so sensitive? Why do you have to come here and are unwilling to change yourself? Isn't this your problem? Now let's start a new conversation. All the previous questions are your fault. Let's just..." As Karl was about to say, "Let's reconcile and start over," he suddenly stopped like a stuck disc. His temples were throbbing wildly and his face, which looked pale due to the cold, began to turn red visibly. Because he smelled a fragrance, the fragrance of barbecued food. Chapter 392 Ugly Things and Goodnight. That massive matter suddenly sensed that Karl behind him had lost his voice and seemed to sense that danger was about to come. After remaining motionless for a short while, he suddenly stood up and prepared to escape. As a result, his escape ended just as it began, as a slender white arm held his shoulder tightly. Putting that piece of object back to its original place, a beautiful face slowly approached and uttered a devilish whisper, "Mr. Diggory, can you tell me why you stayed here so long? Because you were angry about the quarrel with me, or for some other reason? Why do I smell the sweet smell of roasted pumpkin and roasted sweet potatoes?" That mass of stuff hidden under the heavy cotton coat began to shiver upon hearing this. The face hidden in the darkness seemed to have made some kind of determination, and his body also moved along with the determination. Vigorous steps, decisive actions, all for the sake of runaway. Just when Karl's attention was slightly relaxed for a second, that object suddenly squatted down and broke free from his control. Then he rolled on the ground, swung his legs, and ran towards the stairs. The speed was unimaginably fast, but unfortunately it was still a little short. Just as that piece of thing was about to step onto the stairs, a ruthless curse came from behind. "Imprison Incarcerus immediately." A scarlet light hit his back directly, causing him to fall flat on his face. "Oops." As a wailing sounded, Countless equipment scattered all over the ground, and a rich fragrance filled the entire tower. Some of them rolled to Karl's feet. The dark round ball looked so out of place in front of the jade feet wearing crystal high heels. Karl lowered his head and stared at the black coal ball, his cheeks twitching wildly. If he guessed correctly, it should be a slightly mushy sweet potato. On the other hand, the coat, which was as thick as a quilt, reduced a lot of the damage caused by the fall, so that piece of object was not injured by the fall. The coat slowly slid off his face, revealing a dark and dusty face. A pair of eyes looked at Karl slyly, and after finding that the other party did not move. The guy didn't even check if he had any cuts on his head. From the fall. He began to desperately put the things scattered on the ground into his arms. One by one, all the black coal balls scattered on the ground were put back into his arms, but until a pair of crystal high-heeled shoes stepped on a coal ball. Looking at the high-heeled shoe, Cedric couldn't help swallowing, then raised his head stiffly and looked up. He took only a glance and immediately lowered his head because he saw a pair of blue eyes full of anger. "Mr. Diggory, look up." Emotionless words came down from the sky. Cedric lowered his head and shook his head quickly. Karl, who was looking down at him, originally thought that the other party was scared. When he saw this, he felt a little proud and a little soft-hearted at the same time. But after a few seconds, that feeling disappeared instantly, because the feeling from the soles of his feet told him. In these few seconds, the boy with his head down in front of him had not given up the idea of snatching the roasted sweet potato from under his feet. Karl was really angry, and he spoke with a frosty face. "Let go." The first warning had no effect, and the force from the soles of my feet still showed that the other party had not given up. So he spoke again. "Let go." This time the other party hesitated for a few seconds, so there was a third time. "Let go." This time, Karl completely disregarded his image, and his roar was totally inappropriate. Like a huge bell ringing between the mountains, the sound echoed throughout the valley, and the little hand that had refused to give up finally retracted. Only then did Karl slowly bend down and pick up the baked sweet potato very elegantly. The black coal balls were wrapped in white lace gloves, looking so out of place. Just like him and Cedric now. One was wearing a pitch black shirt and his face was covered with black stains. The other one was wearing a pure white haute couture dress and transparent crystal high heels. Her hands were covered in white lace gloves, and she looked as noble as a goddess in heaven. "You disappeared for an entire afternoon, just for something like this?" After a long silence, Karl asked directly. His voice was colder than the cold wind blowing into the room. This made Cedric shudder all over again. He slowly raised his head and was about to explain. But I only saw Karl suddenly turn around and throw the roasted sweet potato in his hand out. "Don't want." Cedric screamed as he held the roasted sweet potatoes and small pumpkin in his arms, like they were his treasures being thrown casually on the ground. The whole person ran towards the railing next to the windowsill as fast as an arrow. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late, and he did not see the groaning of the sweet potato thrown away over there. Standing on the railing next to the windowsill and looking down, you can see the magnificent Alps below. The rolling hills appear even more mysterious under the moonlight. The trees in the mountains have been carved into various shapes by the wind and snow, and occasionally the roar of wild beasts can be heard in the distance. Darkness enveloped everything, and it was impossible to see where anything was falling. Why? Cedric, holding the railing with both hands, kept muttering to himself, as if in a dream. His voice was terribly low and his movements were as fast as lightning. Karl, who was standing in place, only felt a flash before his eyes. The other person rushed in front of him, with tears of grievance on his dark face, and crystal snot coming out of his nostrils. "Why do you do this? I know I'm not good enough, and I also know I don't deserve to stand by your side, but why do you decide everything about me? Why do you?" Cedric accused Karl in tears, until his mouth was blocked by something familiar. It was a roasted sweet potato that was no longer so hot, and the burnt skin and ashes had been removed. All that was left was the charred shell and sweet flesh, which Cedric chewed subconsciously. A full feeling of happiness exploded in his mouth, stopping his tears of grievance from flowing. And Karl, who was sitting opposite him, just sighed helplessly and took off his expensive white lace gloves with light movements. He helped wipe off the stains on the other person's face, as well as the disgusting tears and snot point. Even after wiping it clean, he still couldn't help but complain, "You're still so ugly. It's annoying to look at. I thought I could come to you and comfort you by wearing this damn outfit. After all, you always say that I'm biased. Since I danced with Mr. Lestrange, I should also dance with you, but now it seems that it is no longer necessary." As he said that, Karl yawned, slowly sat down on the ground, and then pulled Cedric, who was still standing straight point after the other person sat on the ground. He leaned over and said in a bad mood, "Don't just focus on eating. Bring me that coat. It should be enough to cover 2 people. It's late. I want to go to bed. Good night, Mr. Diggory." Chapter 393, The True Romance of France. Yes, Minister. 12,316,109 A3. A burst of hurried footsteps broke the quiet atmosphere of the apartment, and the tenants in the room began to complain. Dirty words in French, English, German and Italian were used one after another to denounce this behavior that disturbed people's sleep. This is an old building located in a remote corner of the Champs-Élysées. It is not far from the 2 iconic buildings connected by this main road, Place de la Concorde and Place Charles de Gaulle. The entire building is an ancient brick and stone structure. It looks like a standard 3-story Western style building, while the interior decoration is pure wood. The historic staircase always makes an annoying noise when people are running up and down. But even so, this apartment still has a constant flow of customers, because just around the corner from this apartment is the most famous red light street in the whole of Paris. Men from all over Europe come here to find their own Parisian affair, and then live in these remote apartments. Enjoy the true French romance. Even wizards are no exception. That's right, there are some wizards living in this apartment. They are temporarily living on the 4th floor of this building. The floor that disappeared on the outside was the work of these wizards. The building had 4 floors when it was first built. Just because of the magic, people watching from the outside and the tenants living inside cannot feel the existence of the 4th floor. The reason why these French wizards went to so much trouble and risked being exposed was to perform such a trick on the most prosperous streets of Paris. Its fundamental purpose is funny to say, which is to be the same as other tenants who are temporarily staying here. We all came here to enjoy the true French romance, but today an uninvited guest finally came. A young man wearing a white shirt and dressed like an urban white collar worker broke into the building early in the morning. He didn't care about the noise at all and walked towards the 4th floor with big strides. The cordial greetings in various languages he encountered along the way did not stop him from moving forward until he finally stopped in front of mottled painted door. Looking down at my feet, I saw a pair of new high-heeled shoes placed casually, and a pair of familiar handmade leather shoes next to them. There was a strange expression on the young man's face, and he seemed to be having a fierce ideological struggle. After hesitating for a long time, he finally reached out and knocked on the door. Dang. Dang dang. After the dull sound, there was a chaotic noise and some swear words mixed with gypsy language in the room. It was from a young woman, and there were also some French pleas for mercy, which sounded like an old man. Listening to the noise in the room, the young man's face became even uglier until he suddenly heard the sound of the window being pushed open. He then immediately took out his wand, pointed at the door handle and shouted, "Allahumora. Open the hole." A red light flashed, and the door immediately opened, and the young man rushed in. The moment he entered the room, the scene he saw made him feel even more embarrassed. A pretty red-haired girl who looked like she had just reached adulthood was lying on the bed, using a white quilt to try hard to cover her exposed skin. On the other side, the window of the room was pushed open from the inside, and an old man wearing only a pair of white classic underwear was lying on the curtain, seemingly ready to jump down. The 2 people looked at the young man almost at the same time. The red-haired girl just opened her mouth to scream when she was hit by a bright white light. He fell directly onto the bed and fell into a deep sleep. The old man on the other side, after seeing the appearance of the person coming clearly, immediately became furious and said, "Leonard, who allowed you to come here? How dare you break into my room? Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have become an international aura. I can still rely on my status as the French Minister of Magic. You're Position will be revoked, based on what happened today. Based on what happened today. The young man named Leonard did not show any panic. Because of the old man's anger, he just asked back calmly, then turned his head slightly to look at the red-haired girl who was still sleeping soundly on the bed. This action made the old man even more embarrassed, and he then angrily pushed Mr. Leonard out of the room. Then he slammed the door shut and shouted at the person behind it, "Forget everything you saw today, young man. This is my day off, and I can do what I want with my time." Mr. Leonard, who was turned away, remained expressionless. He did not knock on the door again, but spoke calmly. Senior officials from all departments of the Ministry of Magic request an emergency meeting of the entire French Ministry of Magic to discuss the issue of Grindelwald. Grindelwald. A scream came from the room, followed by dead silence for a full 5 minutes. The sound was heard again in the room. "Wait outside for a while. I'll go back with you after I'm dressed. During this process, you are not allowed to enter this room again." Hearing this, Leonard's husband's face was full of helplessness. He silently leaned his back against the wall. I lit a French Gauloise cigarette and looked at the 2 pairs of shoes placed at the door in front of me through the smoke. He suddenly felt like the man who had received orders from the French General Staff in 1916 and was preparing to invite Marshal Philippe Pétain. The colonel who went to command the Battle of Verdun was said to be in a red light district in Paris at the time. Marshal Pétain was found. He was nearly 70 years old at the time and was enjoying a romantic moment in the room with his lover after so many years. The French men still remember their original aspirations. I don't know if the colonel is as embarrassed as I'm. After smoking 2 cigarettes, the door of the room was slowly pushed open and an old man wearing a long black trench coat and a red bow tie came in. After putting on his shoes with the help of a walking stick, he walked out slowly. He came to Mr. Leonard and warned him with a serious expression, "I'm just out shopping, sir. Please always remember this." Hearing this, Mr. Leonard looked through the other person's profile and into the open room and indeed found that the red-haired girl had disappeared. He immediately retracted his gaze and nodded with a calm expression. "Of course, Minister, not as the minister, but as an individual, Mr. Kyle Raymond." The old man emphasized it again. Leonard also showed a smile on his face, but it was not clear whether that smile was happy or sarcastic. He just nodded and said, "Of course, Mr. Kyle Raymond." Chapter 394, France, 039, Est Relaxation. As it is still the Christmas holiday, the Champs-Élysées in the early morning seems particularly deserted. The defense workers in charge of sanitation were also on vacation and did not come out to clean up. The streets were full of garbage and traces left by the work carnival. A drunkard from last night fell casually in the corner of the street. A homeless man in rags. He was trying his best to find something valuable from the other party, but it was obvious that he was too late. Valuable items such as wallets and watches had already been taken away by the previous few people. The frustrated homeless man had no choice but to steal the drunk man's clothes. Fortunately, it is already early morning. The sun has come out and the temperature is gradually warming up. Otherwise, this drunkard would most likely freeze to death on the most gorgeous street in all of Europe. Mr. Raymond and Mr. Leonard were walking on the street, watching all this calmly, without any intention of stopping it. After all, no one wants to destroy the unique sense of relaxation in this romantic city. After walking 3 or 2 blocks, the two came to a magnificent building. This building is located in the center of Paris and its exterior adopts typical French architectural style. The towering bell tower, exquisite stone carvings and gorgeous iron balconies all showcase the charm of French art. The French Ministry of Magic did not hide its buildings in some remote corner or underground like other countries. Instead, it was built in the middle of the busiest street in Paris, with only the muggle repelling spells set up around it. There is almost no protection around the building, so drunk people often break in. So much so that the number of muggle intrusions reported by the French wizarding community often accounts for at least half of the total number of such cases in the entire European wizarding world. The United Wizarding Conference and the ministries of magic of other countries have repeatedly warned of this situation. But the French just won't change. Don't ask it's still the same feeling of relaxation that is unique to France. As you approach the building, you can see two huge stone lions in front of the door. Their eyes seem to be able to see through everything, guarding the first line of defense of this mysterious ministry of magic. The door is made of heavy oak and is carved with intricate magical runes that only a true wizard can decipher and open. After all, no matter how relaxed you are, if muggles really break into the building, they will be able to see the existence of the entire magical world. That would be a much more serious situation. Especially considering the auras in the French Ministry of Magic have sloppy abilities and personalities. Without these two lines of defense, they might not even notice if a muggle broke in. When you enter the building, the first thing that catches your eye is a spacious hall with exquisite mosaic tiles on the floor and murals depicting the history of magic on the walls. A huge crystal chandelier is placed in the center of the hall, emitting a soft light and illuminating the entire space. Countless employees of the Ministry of Magic were walking around the space in a daze, wearing all kinds of strange clothes. Most of them are pajamas with exaggerated colors and patterns, and some are some weird costumes. For example, the man wearing a white stocking on his left leg and a black stocking on his right leg stands out particularly. He was wearing a pair of exaggerated high heels, and he walked unsteadily, as if he was about to fall at any time. Mr. Leonard looked at his colleagues in front of him, then turned to look at Mr. Raymond without any change in expression. At this time, Mr. Raymond's face was full of gloom, and his eyes were staring at his subordinates, who were yawning, as if they had not woken up yet and were like zombies. He pressed the wand against his throat to increase the volume, and coughed heavily twice. The sound was like two huge alarm clocks, finally waking up these half asleep guys. The result is that just like everyone is grumpy when they wake up, these guys don't even look at who made the noise. When they wake up, they picked up the documents in their hands and threw them towards the direction of the sound. Fortunately, Mr. Leonard was quick-witted and waved his wand lightly, and the documents thrown at him like grenades were gone. They lost their speed in midair and landed lightly on the ground while arranging themselves neatly. Looking at the neatly arranged documents at his feet, Mr. Raymond's eyes twitched wildly, and he looked up at those frightened Ministry of Magic employees. Yelled angrily, "Look at you guys. Do you still have any qualities as a Ministry of Magic employee? What the hell are you wearing? And in what state are you in? You can't even maintain basic attire. It seems that you have finished your work, especially you, Mr." Raymond pointed at the man wearing contrasting stockings and roared with a ferocious look on his face, "Mr. Jim Heck, I think it is necessary for me to have a talk with your leader about reorganizing the Aura team. Some intolerable phenomena have occurred." After criticizing his subordinates, Mr. Raymond did not forget to demonstrate his qualities and abilities as a leader. He adjusted his collar and tie and said with a serious expression, "Don't ever forget your identity. You are employees of the French Ministry of Magic, and you represent the entire French magical world. To maintain French elegance at all times, every detail must be perfectly mastered." Having said that, he turned around and walked towards the stairs in a cool manner, looking at the old and straight back. All of them lowered their heads in shame. Only Mr. Leonard, who had been following behind the other party, smiled meaningfully and shook his head slightly. He was thinking that these people might never know that just a dozen minutes ago, this well-dressed French gentleman, she was still lying on her lover's big bed and was even ready to escape through the window wearing only her underwear. But now, he can openly teach these children a lesson who have just escaped from their warm beds and wonderful holidays. The poor employee who was forcibly awakened. What a damn relaxing feeling. Walking up the stairs, the two came to a gorgeously decorated meeting room. The walls of the conference room are inlaid with various gemstones, sparkling with charming light. A long conference table is placed in the center of the room. Surrounded by comfortable leather chairs, there are various expensive magic books and mysterious props on the table, which are very eye-catching. However, it was impossible for the two people who had just pushed open the door to focus on those items. The people sitting in the conference room are more attractive or more eye-catching than those gorgeous and expensive items. Mr. Raymond stood at the door in a daze, and Mr. Leonard behind him shook his head helplessly for the umpteenth time today. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 395, French Magic World Humanoid Creature Awards. If the scene I saw when I first entered the French Ministry of Magic could be considered a weird meeting point, Mr. Leonard could only describe the scene he saw as a riot of demons compared to the ordinary employees who had just received the news. They were almost forcibly pulled out of their beds. These senior officials received the news half an hour in advance and were notified one by their respective private secretaries. Not only does it completely lack the decency and quality that Mr. Raymond emphasized that the representatives of the French magical world should have. What's even more unsightly is that most of the ordinary employees are just dressed weirdly. Apart from the clothes they wear, every corner of the body of these high-ranking officials reveals lewdness and debauchery. 90% of people have lip marks on their faces that they haven't had time to wipe off. Some people had scars on their faces that looked like they were scratched by kittens. But adults knew the difference. Moreover, the whole conference room was filled with the sweet and greasy smell of the love potion. This was even with two auras holding wands and opening the windows to provide ventilation. Looking at the scene in front of him, even Mr. Raymond, who had known his subordinates for a long time, couldn't help but look embarrassed and angry, and at the same time, felt helpless as the middle ground of the entire Western Europe, whether in the Muggle world or in the magical world. Thanks to its unique geographical advantages, France can always reap the benefits. This results in a special sense of relaxation throughout France, whether it is wizards or ordinary muggles. I only work for 2 months a year and spend 5 of the remaining 10 months at this famous beach spot. The remaining 5 months were either spent preparing or participating in the strike. This is almost a daily phenomenon in French muggle society. And the situation in the corresponding wizarding community is not much better. There are very few working hours in a year, and most of the time, French wizards either hang out in bars or head to the Netherlands or Italy to enjoy the romance in those famous red light districts. It can be said that in the entire French magical world, except for the students of Boxbaton's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, almost no one can work steadily for more than 6 months. This is why, when a sudden situation occurs, the entire French Ministry of Magic appears uneasy and at a loss, just like a stripped girl. But back to the reality. Mr. Raymond, knowing the reality was already like this, did not teach those ordinary employees a lesson as he had before. Instead of lecturing the senior officials in front of him, he sat down quietly in his seat. Then he turned to look at Mr. Leonard, who was standing behind him, and spoke helplessly. If you have anything to say, please speak up quickly, Mr. Leonard. I don't think many of the leaders present are properly prepared for the sudden request for an emergency meeting. Hopefully, that's not a bad thing. These self-comforting words made people want to laugh, and almost everyone present complained in their hearts. How can it be a good thing? Even if the International Wizarding Conference elects you as the chairman of the presidium of the conference, it is impossible to hold an emergency meeting. After all, even the International Confederation of Wizards requires all correspondence to be sent out a week in advance. Otherwise, if it happens to be a holiday, the letter will 200% disappear without a trace. If the International Confederation of Wizards sends a message to the French Ministry of Magic at this time, it would be extremely efficient if the Minister of Magic could receive it before Christmas next year. But no matter how I complained in my heart, at least my leader gave me a way out. Everyone present could only pretend to sit in their seats and strike various poses to look serious at the same time. They were also a little curious about what was the purpose of rushing them here in such a hurry. Mr. Leonard watched all this and followed his leader's words, speaking in a nonchalant manner. It's really not a bad thing, nor a big deal, but Grindelwald sent an invitation to the French Ministry of Magic. It's not a big deal. How can you be so careless and call an emergency meeting in such a hurry? Hearing this, Mr. Raymond, who was filled with rage, started cursing without even thinking. After he opened fire, several other senior officials also joined in reprimanding Mr. Leonard. What on earth are you doing at the Secretariat? It's just an invitation from an ordinary person, but you actually asked for an emergency meeting. It's totally unreasonable. Do You know how embarrassed I was. I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to Lucy properly. That's right. David is still waiting for me at my house. How much will it cost me to coax him after what you did? At first, these guys just criticized Mr. Leonard's work, but as they talked, some strange names popped up. Some of them are his mistresses, but some are harder to comment on. Mr. Leonard can only wish them good health in his heart. In the face of criticism, Mr. Leonard remained silent and just looked at Mr. Raymond quietly. Sure enough, in such a noisy environment, only Mr. Raymond reacted. He mechanically turned his head to look at Mr. Leonard. He asked in a trembling voice, with fear, disbelief and a hint of pleading in his eyes, "Who did you just say invited the French Ministry of Magic? Please repeat that last name again." Hearing this, Mr. Leonard smiled meaningfully, took out his wand, put it to his throat, and spoke loudly with magic to amplify the volume. "Just yesterday, we received a mysterious letter that said it very clearly. Gellert Grindelwald's heir, Lady Theodora Grindelwald, cordially invites all heads of the French Ministry of Magic, go to Père Lachaise Cemetery tomorrow, to attend a grand ball, and enclose a contract guarantee with the letter on the name of Grindelwald. No one will be harmed during the ball." As soon as Mr. Leonard finished speaking, the conference hall, which had been as noisy as a parrot farm before, was now as silent as death. An indescribable despair appeared on the faces of many senior officials, as if they had just heard their personal doctors tell them that they only had one day left to live. The name Grindelwald is like a mountain, weighing heavily on everyone's chest. It made these guys have difficulty breathing. After 10 minutes of silence, someone finally spoke. "What do they want? Did they mention in the letter what they want? Galleons, a castle, or a hidden forbidden magic book? They always have something they want, so as long as their requests are met, you can give them anything." Chapter 396 Go and Kill Grindelwald. The man who said this was Gerald Leroy, the one with the whip marks on his face. This is the Director General of Finance of the French Ministry of Magic. He was born into the Leroy family, a famous French pure-blooded magical aristocracy. The surname Leroy is very noble and literally means king in the French context. The entire family had a huge influence in the French magical world before the appearance of the previous generation Grindelwald. The only families in the French magical world that could rival them were the Lestrange family, which had not suffered the blow, and the Rosier family. At the same time, this name is also very meaningful. Gerald can be translated as warrior with a spear in the French context. Logically, a person with such a name should be a tough person like a warrior, but facts always like to play jokes. The young financial secretary looks skinny and pale. His whole body exudes an air of excessive indulgence, and the impression he leaves on his colleagues is that he is extremely stingy. But now it seems that this impression is wrong. When facing real threats, this warrior seems to be more generous than anyone else. But the one who was even more confused was Mr. Leonard, who heard this. He looked at Director Gerald and the senior officials beside him in a strange way. He asked in a tentative tone, "Leaders, let's not discuss whether there are any specific requirements in the letter for now. We shouldn't think about it first. Do you need to verify the accuracy of this letter? What if it's just a ridiculous prank? In fact, there is no need to say such things at all. After all, if it has not been tested, how could there be a need to mobilize so many people to hold an emergency meeting?" The reason why he said this was, on the one hand, due to Mr. Leonard's own work habits. As a secretary and international aura, he has always been very cautious in doing things. On the other hand, the script he received never anticipated that these people from the French Ministry of Magic had never thought of resisting at all. Not to mention the hardline hawks. There wasn't even a dove who advocated negotiation. Almost everyone was shocked when they heard the name Grindelwald. He had already thought of the posture in which he would surrender, and it happened so fast that he didn't even have time to react. However, what happened next completely refreshed his horizons. The group of senior officials immediately split into two factions. One faction supported the proposal put forward by the financial secretary and kept asking Mr. Leonard whether the other party had put forward any conditions. Another group opposed this plan and demanded that more than just the other party's current conditions be met. You should also ask the other party kindly what price they can offer if you want to maintain long-term peace. They are willing to provide the materials the other party wants. For a long time, in addition to ensuring their own long-term safety. To put it bluntly, one side wants to kneel down and surrender, while the other side thinks that the other side has not kneeled down thoroughly enough. The two sides immediately began a heated debate on the issue of surrender, and the two sides were on the verge of a fight, and the argument was difficult to resolve for a while. The quarrel lasted for half an hour until Mr. Raymond, who was sitting at the head of the table, suddenly slammed the table hard and shouted loudly, "Do you still have any sense of shame? Do you still have the dignity of being an official of the Ministry of Magic? How can you discuss such things in the meeting room? I am deeply ashamed of this, and you have really let me down." After these words were spoken, the group of senior officials could not help but look ashamed and lowered their heads, not daring to look at their minister's eyes. Mr. Leonard, who had been standing behind Mr. Raymond, always looked at him with some surprise. Among all the situations he had anticipated, he had never thought that his extremely lustful minister would become the last hope of the French Ministry of Magic. I couldn't help but feel a little admiration for each other. Unfortunately, the admiration did not last for more than a few seconds, as Mr. Raymond turned around and looked at Mr. Leonard behind him. And the two auras who were responsible for maintaining order spoke righteously. "Mr. Leonard, please lead these two auras on duty to investigate who sent this letter. If possible, go to Père Lachaise Cemetery and make the necessary inquiries. I authorize you to use force, even to arrest the wizard on the spot. Go now." Hearing this, Mr. Leonard's face was full of question marks. He stood there for a full 10 seconds. He even wondered if there was something wrong with his hearing. He was an international aura himself, leading two trainee auras who were forced to be on duty during the holidays because they were interns. Go to the gathering place of the largest dark wizard organization in Europe, conduct investigations, and even arrest some dark wizards. He suddenly remembered an oriental novel he had read, in which there was a plot about an insect demon with 9 heads. He asked one of his monsters, a carp spirit, to kill the Monkey King and his 3 disciples who had caused chaos in the Heavenly Palace. This isn't asking me to investigate at all, it's asking me to die. And as a political veteran, he quickly understood the meaning behind the other party's order. As long as he leads his men to investigate Père Lachaise Cemetery, there will be only 3 situations that can occur. When he met Grindelwald, the 2 rookie auras were killed instantly by the opponent, and he luckily escaped with his rich combat experience. After returning to the Ministry of Magic, he told the minister everything he had seen. After hearing it, he expressed his heartache and thought deeply. In order to save more lives, he decided to lead the crowd to surrender. The second situation was that all 3 of them died. After hearing this, the minister expressed his heartache and thought carefully. It shows that one of the only 2 international auras of the French Ministry of Magic has been killed in the battle. The French Ministry of Magic is no longer able to resist and finally decides to lead the people to surrender. The third situation is a fantasy where the 3 of them go there and find out that it is just a complete prank. After his report, newspapers all over Europe would boast about it the next day, saying that the French Minister of Magic had a keen eye and could see through the scam. Grindelwald has become a distant legend, and peace in the European wizarding world has finally arrived. Anyway, resistance is for a better surrender, and for the glory of the French Ministry of Magic. As for their portrio, it was obvious that they were not in their consideration. Those senior officials who were discussing how to surrender a few minutes ago suddenly understood the good intentions of their leader. They all praised Mr. Raymond's wisdom and intelligence and began to urge Mr. Leonard to set off quickly. Just like that, Mr. Leonard, who was already disappointed, was kicked out of the entire conference room along with the 2 terrified rookies. The 3 people standing at the door of the conference room were silent for another 5 minutes, and then a rookie aura asked tremblingly, "Sir, what should we do? I don't want to die yet." Chapter 397. Excited Mr. Lian Wang Hearing this, Mr. Leonard could only sigh, then turn to look at the two rookies behind him, and warn them with a serious face. You two should go to the outside of Père Lachaise Cemetery immediately. Be sure to keep your distance, and avoid muggles approaching. If you encounter any disturbance during this process, report back to the French Ministry of Magic immediately. I will explore the situation inside alone. You guys go and prepare. Hearing this, the two trainee auras nodded desperately, as if they had been granted amnesty, then turned and left at an extremely fast speed. These two guys even forgot their identities as wizards, and their legs were running so fast that after images were almost left. On the other side, Mr. Leonard, who had sent the two men away, still seemed to be hoping for a lucky break, and put his head against the door behind him. I wanted to hear something different about the meeting, but unfortunately, another full minute passed before I could hear the voice coming from behind the door still discussing how to surrender. Resistance is impossible. Even the price of surrender, the way these guys behind the door discussed it, was very strange. Others discussed surrender, generally in the hope of making the price lower, but this group of guys is completely different. One side wants to fully agree to all the requests of the other side. The other party thinks that what the other party said is too conservative. Shouldn't they agree to something if the other party doesn't ask for it? Hearing such inhuman words, Mr. Leonard felt a headache and then quickly used apparition to leave the corridor. Soon, with a burst of air, Mr. Leonard appeared in a shabby bar. The environment here is dirty and run down, with peeling paint on the walls and stains all over the floor. The air was filled with a strong, nauseating smell of alcohol and tobacco. The bar was filled with all kinds of characters, including short goblins, strange and ferocious magical animals, and the largest number of dark wizards. They engage in various illegal transactions here, such as selling various dangerous potions, smuggling magical animals and goods, etc. These people are the scum of the French magical world, and they are also the true face of the entire French magical world. Beneath the glamorous appearance in the corner of the bar, there is a small stage, surrounded by simple red cloth strips, to form a small space. Every night, there are some performers performing here, and the performances are basically vulgar. Sometimes, there were even some villa captured by wizards who came to perform, and the audience enjoyed it very much, and took out their wallets to give them tips. But just like the environment here, these guys are very stingy with their rewards, usually just some copper nuts. Occasionally, you can see silver sparkles on the dance floor. Mr. Leonard, who was well dressed, came to the railing at the edge of the dance floor under the gaze of countless people. He took out a glittering gold galleon from his pocket and threw it into the dance floor with a flick of his thumb. When the golden coin fell to the ground, there was a crisp sound, and at the same time, there were curses and insults from all around. The dark wizards who had been gathered around the railing to watch the performance dispersed reluctantly. The scantily clad dancers on the stage stared at Mr. Leonard with seductive eyes, while the staff around them lowered the red curtains around them. Prepare to let the distinguished guests enjoy VIP services. This is the rule of the stage. One gold galleon can enjoy half an hour of VIP service. As the personal secretary to the French Minister of Magic, he is also the only international aura in the French Ministry of Magic. Mr. Leonard certainly didn't come here because he was possessed by Teddy, or because he was intoxicated by the scent of aphrodisiacs in the conference room. He came here just to meet someone, instead of enjoying this cheap pornographic service. After the last curtain fell, the beautiful dancer on the stage walked backstage with sexy steps after her figure disappeared. Mr. Leonard was the only one left in this makeshift enclosed space. Or two people, without any trace or flow of air. Mr. Lian Wang appeared behind him. Just like that, two international auras appeared in the den of thieves at the same time. If the bar owner saw this scene, he might faint from fright on the spot. I thought you would not come to me to report the situation until at least half an hour later. After all, it has been half a century. This is the first time that the surname Grindelwald has reappeared on the European continent. This will be the first step in a great journey, and will have extraordinary historical significance. Even those cowardly bugs will inevitably feel a sense of mission, because they are in the torrent of history. Their decision will determine the future of the entire magical world of Magic Country. It is foreseeable that there will be entanglements and disputes, as Soon as we met, Mr. Lian Wang seemed very excited, like an actor performing a drama in an opera. How's point the body sways slowly with the generous words, and every movement is full of grace and power, but Mr. Leonard on the other side just kept silent with a gloomy face, and even his eyes were a little evasive. Point however, Mr. Lian Wang did not catch these signals. At this moment, he was still completely immersed in his own fantasy world. Point as a senior saint and a staunch supporter of wizard unification in his nearly 40 years of life. Point ever, since he was old enough to understand, he had been imagining today's scene all the time. He had rehearsed it tens of millions of times on the small stage in his mind. Point a fierce collision of different ideas, a powerful historical torrent, noble honor and despicable betrayal. Point all these factors mixed together will create a great epic drama. Point and now the drama in his mind is finally about to begin in reality. How can he not be excited? So he continued talking to himself. I think the scene must have been very intense. Although I doubt the courage of those people, there should have been a small group of people who wanted to resist. There are even some people who want to take tough measures, and will definitely seek help from the ministries of magic of other countries. He even wants to take this opportunity to integrate the entire European magic world. This should be considered a Napoleon-style political performance. Of course there are still a small number of people who want to surrender. They should be hiding very deeply, and may even want to contact us secretly. They are traitorous characters like the Joker, who often betray us at critical moments. Such people are just embellishments in great epics. After all, we must allow for a little imperfection and perfect things. Listening to the various role arrangements given by his colleague, Mr. Leonard suddenly felt awkward, as if something was on his lips. But he didn't know how to start. Point he hesitated for a long time and wanted to speak several times, but he couldn't bear to interrupt the other party. Point until Mr. Lian Wang felt that he had been speaking a little impolitely. He stopped, turned to look at Mr. Leonard, and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I got a little excited. I forgot to ask you what your mission was here." Arrest. Grindelwald. Chapter 398. Mr. Lian Wang can 039 figure it out. Perhaps out of shame, or perhaps because the reality he knew was a little too difficult to say out loud, Mr. Leonard gave this answer somehow. Point upon hearing this answer, Mr. Lian Wang immediately became excited and said with emotion, "I never expected that they could reach an agreement in such a short time and adopt a head-on confrontation approach. I always thought they were a bunch of greedy, lustful losers with no courage or bottom line. Now it seems that I was deceived by their appearance. Those who can become high-ranking officials in the Ministry of Magic must have something special." Hearing this, Mr. Leonard was so embarrassed that he almost dug his toes into the ground. Point he took several deep breaths, mustering up his courage to tell the truth, but just as he was about to speak, Mr. Lian Wang took the lead and analyzed with a serious expression. "If they choose to confront us head-on, that would be exactly what we want. When are they ready to move? Or should we put on a big show first? We haven't played against each other for a long time, and my hands just happen to be itching. Why don't we fight each other first to speed up the guys behind you? At the same time, we can also make a bigger noise. Grindelwald's return must be shocking enough. Let the entire European magical world tremble once again." After he finished speaking, Mr. Lian Wang had already taken out his magic wand. It seems that they are prepared to use the lives of all the dark wizards in this black bar as fireworks to welcome Grindelwald's return. Mr. Leonard touched his face awkwardly and stood there motionless. After 5 full minutes, Mr. Lian Wang's right hand, which was holding the wand, felt sore from holding it, so he slowly put it down and walked to the other person's side. He asked with a puzzled look on his face, "Is there a problem? I have already investigated this bar and all the wizards who have consumed here today. Basically, they all have criminal records. Some of them may not be sentenced to death, but who can blame them for their bad luck? Being able to dedicate their filthy lives to Grindelwald is already the greatest honor of their lives. As for those Velar and magical creatures, killing them may be a mercy and relief to them. So, do you have any concerns?" Hearing this, Mr. Leonard was really speechless. They were both members of the French Ministry of Magic. The guy in front of me was as violent as a bloodthirsty werewolf. When faced with difficulties and obstacles, his only answer was kill point. But those senior officials who are still in the Ministry of Magic are as cowardly as turtles. When faced with any difficulties and obstacles, their answer is basically surrender point. How can there be such a big difference between us, even though we are all the same people? Mr. Leonard just felt a headache, and at the same time he could not approve of the other party's random killing point. As an international aura, he naturally did some background checks. After knowing the meeting place point, he knew very well that among the so-called dark wizards who came here to consume today, the most serious crime they committed was having an affair with the mistress of a high-ranking official point. The rest are basically just theft or smuggling of rare goods, and the quantities are very small point. Although this bar looks like a criminal den on the surface, it is actually just a place where a group of low-level wizards brag. You have to know that those powerful dark wizards who are truly guilty of heinous crimes often do not show up in front of the public point. Moreover, most of them live a wealthy life and have their own castles and territories, but Mr. Lian Wang in front of him didn't care about any of this. He only knew that killing these guys here could expand the impact of this incident. Thinking of this, Mr. Lian had kind of missed those cowards in the Ministry of Magic. He took a few deep breaths, calmed himself down, and looked at the other person helplessly. I don't want to hit you, Lian, but sometimes reality can be more outrageous than some dramas, because a good drama always has a good script, but reality doesn't need a script, and it's always unexpected. What do you mean? Mr. Lian Wang felt something was wrong. Mr. Lian had told the whole story in detail, everything he had seen in the past hour. Anyway, that's the situation. I did get an order to arrest Grindelwald, but it wasn't really an order. It's more like a disgusting political calculation, which is absolutely ridiculous. After saying that, Mr. Leonard took out a cigarette box from his pocket and lit a cigarette for himself again. On the other side, Mr. Lian Wang looked unwilling to believe it, and stood there in silence until a pile of cigarette butts that had just been extinguished appeared at Mr. Leonard's feet. Mr. Lian Wang then slowly raised his head, snatched the last cigarette from the other person's cigarette box, lit it with magic, took a deep breath, and exhaled slowly. After completing this epic lung-breaking event that would have made the King of Hell kowtow to him, he said with a helpless smile, "You mean, without any argument, in less than 5 minutes, those guys were ready to give up the entire French magical world, surrender to us directly, and the only point of contention will be the completeness of the surrender. To be exact, it only took about 1 minute and 29 seconds. Mr. Leonard snatched the cigarette from the other person's hand, took a puff and said, "I asterisk asterisk asterisk." Mr. Lian Wang cursed, snatched the cigarette again, took a puff, exhaled a smoke ring, and said helplessly, "We spent 2 days thinking about countless possibilities and making countless plans for what to do now. We considered confronting the French Ministry of Magic directly, and even considered starting another European wizarding war over this incident. We also considered the possibility that the other party might use delaying tactics, as well as other possibilities, but, at least." Mr. Lian Wang smoked the cigarette, butt in his hand thoroughly, until he threw it on the ground, because it was too hot. After stomping out the fire with his feet, he shouted hysterically, "But at least they should resist, even if it's just a verbal fight. How come the other side is ready to surrender before the two sides even meet each other? Is there anything more fucked up than this? We are now the ones who are unreasonable. They have already raised their hands in surrender. It is impossible to force them to stand up and resist. But if they are unwilling to even put up a symbolic resistance, how can this drama continue? What a bunch of asterisk asterisk asterisk. I asterisk 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 them. Really asterisk asterisk asterisk." Chapter 399 Angry Mr. Lian Wang. Watching Mr. Lian Wang swearing like crazy here, Mr. Leonard had no choice but to stand aside awkwardly, with no other options, until the boss in charge of stage management quietly walked up to Mr. Leonard and reminded him in a low voice, "Boss, one gold galleon can only book the place for 20 minutes. Do you two want to extend the time or find some girls to accompany you?" "Fuck your grandma. Mr. Lian Wang, who was already angry, roared and grabbed the back of his boss's head with his right hand as fast as lightning. He pressed the opponent's head and smashed it hard against the railing next to the stage. The only sound was a broken nose. The poor boss fainted with blood all over his fat and ugly face. Because of this, the nose bone was completely broken and sunken, and the whole face looked like a goblin. I guess I'll be able to perform on my own in the future. On the other side, Mr. Leonard, who had been silent all the time, just leaned over and checked his boss's pulse. After making sure that the other party was not dead, he stood up and looked at Mr. Lian Wang and asked helplessly, "It's useless to vent now. What should we do next? The current situation has exceeded all our previous plans, and we must take action. How the hell do I know what to do?" Mr. Lian Wang said angrily, with a look of desperation on his face. "If Miss Grindelwald hadn't promised that they would never be harmed today, I will rush straight to the French Ministry of Magic and let them know why I was expelled from the International Confederation of Wizards." Hearing this, Mr. Leonard could only remain silent. He knew too well the man in front of him, the youngest international aura in the French wizarding world. What is his work style? His international aura examination was the most unique one. He was the only one who passed the entire exam. The reason for this was the last subject of the International Aura exam. This exam is completely different from other aura exams, in that it does not require the examinee to subdue any powerful magical beasts or capture some dark wizards on wanted posters. Instead, the examinees are allowed to fight each other, and the remaining 10% will automatically become international auras. Although this rule seems cruel, it actually takes some human considerations into account. Generally speaking, those who are able to take the International Aura examination are outstanding auras recommended by their own country's Ministry of Magic. The number of places recommended by each country's Ministry of Magic is limited, so the number of people taking the exam each year is fixed. 10% is exactly the number of people taking the exam from 2 or 3 countries. So usually when it comes to the last stage, auras from the same country often choose to cooperate. But the one in front of him is completely different. It was because of his presence that he was the only one left standing on the field in the end. Examiners from other countries, including his former colleagues, all failed in that exam, fainted completely, and some even suffered lifelong disabilities. The International Confederation of Wizards has received a lot of criticism for this incident. The French Ministry of Magic was even more scared to death. Under pressure from public opinion at the time, the International Confederation of Wizards had no choice but to recruit this special international aura directly under its command. The other party was made an aura directly under the International Confederation of Wizards, but less than 2 months had passed before the storm subsided. Mr. Lian Wang was sent back to France by the International Confederation of Wizards because of his excessively violent law enforcement. However, the French Ministry of Magic did not formally incorporate the other party, but only tacitly approved its activities in France. This also led to him becoming the most unique stateless aura in the entire magical world. So to be honest, the French Ministry of Magic has no leadership over it. If the other party rushes into the French Ministry of Magic, they will beat up those cowardly officials. Judging from the current laws of the wizarding world, there is really no good way to convict the other party. Thinking of this, Mr. Leonard immediately became alert and grabbed Mr. Lian Wang's right hand tightly. "What are you doing? What does it look like for 2 grown men to be pulling each other?" Mr. Lian Wang, whose right hand was grabbed, looked at the other party angrily. "I was afraid you'd run away," Mr. Leonard replied expressionlessly. This answer made Mr. Lian Wang suddenly feel a chill, and he tried desperately to break free from the other party's restraints. However, he did not expect that the other party would pull him tighter and tighter, and finally even hugged his arm into his arms. Mr. Lian Wang's eyelids twitched wildly, and he could only temporarily give in and say this: "Let's talk it out, don't argue. Don't worry, I was just venting my anger. I will never take action against those rubbish without Miss Grindelwald's order. The current situation is no longer something we can control. Let me go, and let me report to Miss Grindelwald. Let's see what to do next." "Really?" Mr. Leonard stared into Mr. Lian Wang's eyes and asked sincerely, "Don't lie to me." Looking at the other person's sincere eyes, Mr. Lian Wang only felt that chill coming back again. He shook his head like a rattle and nodded vigorously, assuring in a firm tone, "I won't lie to you. Let me go quickly. Time waits for no one." Only then did Mr. Leonard slowly let go of the other person's right hand and return to his previous position, as if nothing had happened. Said expressionlessly, "Then hurry up. I need to meet up with those two rookies immediately to avoid arousing their suspicion." After saying that, he just stood there blankly, with no intention of speaking anymore. No more. Mr. Lian Wang, who had been waiting for a long time, was a little angry. No, what else can there be? Mr. Leonard nodded expressionlessly. Seeing this scene, Mr. Lian Wang's expression was a little distorted. After being awkward for a long time, he turned around and left. Not until his figure completely disappeared did an obscene voice come from the ground. "That one seems angry, Mr." Leonard looked down and found that the boss who had been knocked unconscious had woken up at some point. He was staring at himself with an expression that showed, "I'm so happy." Why is he angry? Mr. Leonard didn't quite understand, but soon he seemed to realize something. His expression became as awkward as Mr. Lian Wang's before, and then he looked viciously at the boss lying on the ground. He raised his foot and kicked the opponent in the face, pushing the already sunken nose further in. Even until the other party fainted, he still seemed a little unsatisfied, took out his magic wand and pressed it against the back of the other party's head. With a little more force, a silver white light shot directly into the opponent's brain, completely destroying the neurons in the opponent's brain. The boss, who had already fainted, rolled his eyes and foamed at the mouth, completely losing all his memory and brain function. After doing all this, Mr. Leonard quietly stood up and left. He was indeed not as direct and violent as Mr. Lian Wang. But he has never been a good person. It's just that his methods are more humane and covered. It seems that soon, this stage will have another performance item, and its name may be called the Ugly Fool Goblin. Chapter 400 Père Lachaise Cemetery. On the other side of the city, in the early morning at Père Lachaise Cemetery, the moonlight shines on the ancient tombstones, creating a quiet and mysterious scene. There was silence all around, with only the breeze blowing gently, bringing a hint of coolness. The shadows of the trees in the distance were swaying, as if telling stories of the past. This is the largest cemetery in Paris, located in the 20th arrondissement of Paris, covering an area of approximately 44 hectares. It is not only a famous cemetery, but also a major attraction in Paris, because it is the burial place of many historical celebrities. Originally the luxurious villa of Jesuit Lachaise, Louis XIV's confessor, it was later converted into a cemetery by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1804. The cemetery is divided into 97 graves and has buried millions of people. Many famous French and international figures are buried here, such as composer Chopin, writer Balzac, Oscar Wilde, etc. Of course, the tomb of the most important wizard, the Lestrange family, is also located in this cemetery. However, unlike other famous figures, he was not buried in the most conspicuous position in the cemetery, but was located at the bottom of the entire cemetery. Carol, or Theodora Grindelwald, was standing quietly on the high ground outside the cemetery. Looking down at the entire cemetery, tombstones stand quietly in the cemetery, engraved with the names and life stories of the deceased. These tombstones have witnessed the ups and downs of countless lives, and carry people's thoughts and memories for their loved ones in this peaceful land. Time seems to have stopped, making people feel a tranquility that transcends the world. The surrounding scenery is also exceptionally beautiful. The stars in the early morning sky twinkled faintly, adding a romantic atmosphere to the quiet cemetery. Occasionally a bird that had woken up early would fly by, chirping sadly, breaking the tranquility. A grave is a place to bury the past, but it can also be a place for the living to start anew. Karl felt a little emotional and wanted to show off. As soon as he finished speaking, a discordant voice sounded beside him. "Do we have to choose this location? It always feels chilly here. I'm almost catching a cold. Besides, can't we come at noon or in the afternoon? It's really embarrassing to get up before daybreak." Cedric, or Ludwig von Eisenstein, muttered quietly while wearing a gorgeous black saint uniform and a golden mask. Karl, whose atmosphere was interrupted turned around and stared at the other party with anger on his face. If it weren't for the undisguised Kevin Lestrange standing next to him, he really wanted to kick this guy down and teach him a lesson on the art of disguise. Besides, what does catching a cold have to do with this place? It's just that I was throwing a tantrum and had to run to the tower to roast sweet potatoes. Doing this in a high altitude area in winter, you'd be lucky if you weren't frozen. Silly. Cedric, who was glared at fiercely, quickly shut up and lowered his head while saying with some resentment in his heart, "Why? Blame me? If you hadn't liked to snatch the quilt when you sleep and completely took away my coat, I wouldn't have caught a cold." What? A domineering guy, totally unreasonable. While Cedric kept blaming Karl in his heart, Kevin Lestrange, who had been standing beside him, was staring at him. The more he looked at the guy in front of him, the more he felt that he was exactly like someone he hated. Although under the blessing of the two magical masks and coats, I couldn't see the other person's figure and appearance features. But the disgusting aura and stupidity that this guy exudes are exactly the same. If there weren't a group of people watching behind him, he would have taken the mask off this guy's face today. Take a look at what the other person looks like. How can there be such a similar and annoying guy? In addition to the trio standing in front, there was a large group of saints following behind Carol, led by Mr. Friedrich von Strauss. This handsome old man was wearing an elegant bold tuxedo, a fashionable jewel brooch and a monocle. He also silently gazed at the cemetery at the foot of the mountain, his thoughts flying, and he spoke with emotion. Sometimes, the empty and lonely feeling that is unique to cemeteries is not entirely sad. Here, people can put aside worldly troubles and think quietly about the meaning of life. All the laughter and tears we once had have gone with the wind and turned into eternal memories, but we still have to move forward and cherish every moment. I always thought that the next time I came back to this place, it would be for my funeral. I never thought that I could come back here alive again. After saying this, the somewhat awkward atmosphere was brought back to a climax. Be it Karl, Cedric, or Kevin Lestrange, they all put away their previous little emotions and became serious again. A group of people dressed in the uniform Black Saints uniform, just like the fascist stormtroopers that Mussolini prepared to march into Rome and seize power more than half a century ago. Standing on this small hillside, gazing at the cemetery below the mountain and the city in the distance. It was as if they only needed a signal to rush into the city and burn it to ashes. Finally, the signal came, and there was still no movement of air. Mr. Lian Wang appeared in front of Karl, silently knelt on one knee and said respectfully, "My dear madam, I have brought you some very bad news." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the entire Saint team immediately became tense, and many people already held their wands in their hands just waiting for Karl's order. They would plunge into the battle. Carol's expression remained calm, and he nodded slowly. It seems that the French Ministry of Magic still has some spirit. I initially thought that they would most likely only ask the International Confederation of Wizards for help, or write a letter to Dumbledore across the sea, but at least he should send some people over to negotiate with us. But I never thought they would be so tough and choose to confront us directly. Having said that, Karl turned around and prepared to give orders to the saints behind him. After all, his strategic goal was to cause chaos in the entire European magical world. This will help his other identities plan to be carried out smoothly, and he doesn't really care about the process and means it just takes a little more time to explain to the old B. But just as he was about to give the order, Mr. Lian Wang behind him seemed to have made some important decision. Suddenly he stopped loudly. "That's not the case, madam. You may have misunderstood me. The French Ministry of Magic has no intention of resisting directly, but they have not agreed to negotiate. They want to surrender directly." "What did you say?" Chapter 401. Who allowed them to surrender? Being the center of attention of thousands of people may be a scene that all boys have dreamed of, whether it is at a grand political rally, or giving an inspiring speech. Or you could defeat a powerful opponent on a bloody arena, raise your bloody hands high, and enjoy the cheers of the audience. Or at your own funeral, use your soul to observe how people remember you, if you have a soul. Mr. Lian Wang had imagined all the moments when he was the focus of everyone's attention, but he had never thought that he would be so embarrassed when it actually happened. Half kneeling on the ground, he brought a piece of news that made people laugh and cry. The moment he finished speaking, Karl let out an unbelievable cry. At the same time, everyone behind him looked at Mr. Lian Wang, who was half kneeling on the ground, with an incredulous look. The awkward silence lasted for 5 minutes before Karl, the leader, asked doubtfully, "Did I hear you correctly, Mr. Lian Wang?" He is unwilling to negotiate, unwilling to engage in confrontation, and unwilling to seek help from the Ministry of Magic of any country, without even the courage to meet. The French Ministry of Magic wants to surrender directly. This is what some people think. Or is it because your work is so outstanding that the entire Ministry of Magic has been infiltrated into a sieve? Hearing this, Mr. Lian Wang was speechless. He did not stand up, but still half knelt on the ground and spoke helplessly. It is not the idea of a few people, but a joint decision of the entire Ministry of Magic's top management. Although I'm not under the management of the French Ministry of Magic, but I've been here for nearly 5 or 6 years, and in all this time, I've never seen them reach such a unified consensus on anything. There wasn't even any opposition. The only dilemma was the degree of surrender, whether to kneel down now and find a way to stand up later, or simply kneel down and never stand up again. This may be the only focus of their argument. Hearing such absurd remarks, not to mention Carol, even Mr. Strauss, who was used to seeing corrupt senior officials, was quite surprised and sighed. It's amazing how groups of even invertebrate single-celled organisms can form without adequate pheromone guidance. It's not necessarily possible for a biological being to act so uniformly. It seems like this aspect is despicable, shameless, and weak. These senior officials of the French Ministry of Magic are truly unrivaled. At the end, Mr. Strauss couldn't help but let out a long sigh. While he was sighing, Cole was in distress because his strategic goal was to bring chaos to the entire French magical world. At the same time, it will cause turmoil in the entire magical community of continental Europe. Only in this way can the group of wizards in the British magical community be guaranteed. During the impending subprime mortgage crisis, people would not flee to the European continent. After all, it is easy to consider which is more serious, having no money or losing one's life. However, the actions of the French Ministry of Magic completely disrupted all his plans. He had never imagined that there was a country's Ministry of Magic that could completely disregard its past historical honors and its reputation in the wizarding world. Without even a symbolic resistance, he kneels down in front of you and calls you daddy. You feel embarrassed to let go of that hand you raised high. After all, the other person has knelt down and called you daddy. You can't force him to stand up and resist. If that's the case, neither myself nor the Saints organization can be called villains, but should be called psychopaths. Thinking of this, Cole scratched his head in distress, and for a moment he really didn't know what to do. While he was in distress, the Saints behind him, who had already prepared for battle, all fell into deep thought. Some of them even seemed a little impatient and shouted loudly because of the huge psychological gap. If all else fails, just kill them all. If we kill them all, the French magical world will inevitably fall into chaos. We have completed half of our goal. You are an idiot. Another person immediately retorted, why should we kill them? They have already knelt down and surrendered, and they surrendered without any resistance, and yet they were all killed in this situation. Even the worst dark wizard wouldn't do such a perverted thing. Then, what do you think we should do? The person who was refuted shouted in dissatisfaction. We have been waiting for nearly half a century. We finally waited for Grindelwald's successor to appear and lead us towards greater interests again. As a result, we are just standing here stupidly. I have already written a suicide note to my wife and I'm ready to sacrifice myself. As a result, they are doing nothing now and surrendering. Who allowed them to surrender? The loud roar was so loud that it woke up all the birds in the woods on the entire hillside. Countless birds flew into the sky from the branches of the trees, making a noisy sound. Carol couldn't help but look up and gave a meaningful smile. Kevin Lestrange beside him turned to look at the two saints who had just spoken and scolded them expressionlessly. Be quiet. Have you forgotten the rules of the organization? You don't have Miss Grindelwald's permission. Who allowed you to discuss this without permission? According to the rules, you will be sentenced to death by heart-piercing punishment. As he spoke, Kevin Lestrange took out his wand, ready to give the two saints a cruciatus. The two saints had no intention of resisting. They half knelt on the ground, trembling all over, waiting for the judge's judgment point. After waiting for a long time, the pain that was worse than death still did not appear. When I looked up, I saw only the beautiful and noble Miss Grindelwald held down the judge's right hand, which was holding up his wand, and looked at everyone with a confident and gentle smile on her face. There's no need to punish them. I pardoned them, but not for no reason. Their words just now reminded me, this whole thing should have been led by us, who allowed them to surrender, without our permission. They don't even have the qualifications to kneel down. Even if they want to kneel, they have to stand there. As he spoke, Karl looked at the only muggle in the group, Mrs. Joseph, who was wearing a saint's uniform, and looked like a widow. He said gently with a smile, "My dear madam, the French wizarding world is not just the French Ministry of Magic, it is also your Lestrange families. You've spent so much money, and supported so many people. It's time to let them play a role. If the senior officials of the French Ministry of Magic are unwilling to come, then let some people who want to come. I believe in those nosy journalists. Some people are still not afraid of death. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 402 Step 1 Preparation. As you wish, my lady. Without much explanation, Mrs. Joseph immediately responded with a smile, and then disappeared into the team under the leadership of her husband. After giving the first order, Carol turned around and looked at Mr. Lian Wang, who was still half kneeling on the ground, and asked with a smile, "Did the Ministry of Magic really not send anyone? Even if it was just a test or a cover-up, even if you surrender, you should send a surrender representative." Hearing this, Mr. Lian Wang answered directly without hesitation, "Yes, they sent another international aura, Leonard, and 2 trainee rookies. He wants to use the fate of these 3 people as a fig leaf to cover up his own incompetence. It seems there are still smart people out there." Karl nodded with a smile, but in the next instant he suddenly put away his smile and spoke with a cold face. "Then borrow the lives of those 2 unlucky guys. Sometimes you can't blame others for your bad luck. Go and notify them." Hearing this, Mr. Lian Wang immediately stood up, saluted, and disappeared silently from the spot point. After giving these 2 orders, Karl refocused his gaze on the Père Lachaise cemetery beneath his feet, and said with some helplessness, "To be honest, I really don't want to repeat myself, but sometimes classics are classics for a reason." After that, Carol turned his head slightly to look at the people behind him, and said with a sneer, "Let me turn this place back to ashes, and finish the drama that my grandfather did not finish before. My followers are going to set out for the greater good, for the greater good." The saints held up their wands and shouted in unison, their voices echoing in the grove. Then it gradually dissipated, and when the flying birds returned to the branches, the crowd had disappeared. On the other side, in a muggle bar 2 blocks away from Père Lachaise cemetery. Mr. Leonard calmly opened the door, ordered 2 glasses of gin for himself, and sat down on a seat beside him with his glass. The 2 frightened rookie auras had been waiting here for a long time. When they saw him coming, they asked nervously, "Sir, what is the situation? Should we go to the mission site? Has the Ministry of Magic changed its mind? If all else fails, we can report him to the International Confederation of Wizards. After all, Grindelwald is a threat to the entire European wizarding world. If that doesn't work, we..." Mr. Leonard made a silencing gesture, interrupting the 2 guys' speeches, and slowly tapped the table with a whiskey glass in his hand, and spoke calmly, "Don't say anything else, and don't think about it. We are just here to drink today. We haven't received any mission. It's a holiday today, isn't it?" "Ah." The 2 rookie auras looked at their superiors with confusion. Mr. Leonard played with the wine glass in his hand, staring at the amber liquid in the glass and smiled disdainfully. Auras. Need a written order from the director of the Department of Law Enforcement before they can go out on a mission. Alternatively, a written order from the Minister of Magic will suffice. Did you get any written orders when you came out today? No. The two rookie auras shook their heads at the same time. Seeing this, Mr. Leonard raised his glass with a smile and poured some of the gin in his glass into the glasses in front of the two people. Then he raised his glass and smiled. That's it. Then we didn't receive any orders. You two just skipped work during the holidays and came here to have a couple of drinks with me. We know nothing and have never been to the highest conference room. Raise your glasses and let us throw ourselves into the arms of the goddess of alcohol. After hearing this, no matter how dumb the two rookie auras were, they understood what the other party meant, but they were still a little nervous seeing this. Mr. Leonard did not immediately raise the glass in front of him and took the lead to drink up the remaining wine in his glass. Seeing that their superiors had already toasted, the two rookie auras did not dare to say anything more and quickly picked up the glasses in front of them. Drink the wine in the glass in one gulp. Bang. The moment the wine was finished, there was a sound of something heavy falling to the ground, and the two rookie auras who had just raised their glasses to drink were there. They fell directly on the table, and the moment they fell, the bar, which was noisy just now, immediately became extremely quiet. Whether it's the bartender who has just taken over the night shift and is wiping the wine glasses, or the customers who come in the early morning for their first glass of wine. Or maybe there was a drunkard who was still hungover and sleeping soundly on the bar, and all the sounds disappeared in an instant. Those guys' faces turned extremely pale, with blood gleaming at the corners of their mouths, just like wax figures in a wax museum. What you do at the last moment of your life is preserved forever. Jingle bell. The door of the bar was pushed open from the outside again, and Mr. Leonard walked in with brisk steps. When closing the store, he thoughtfully put a sign saying "out of business" outside the door, then took out his magic wand and waved it gently. All the curtains next to the windows were dropped, completely isolating the entire bar from the outside world. After doing all this, Mr. Leonard looked around with satisfaction until a rather weak voice sounded, "I think you should feed me the antidote first, Mr." Leonard then walked slowly behind Mr. Leonard and glanced at Mr. Leonard, who was pale and had slight bleeding at the corner of his mouth. He said with a cold snort, "Don't you have anything to say to me, Mr.?" Leonard raised his head with difficulty, glanced at the other person, and then lowered his head without saying a word. This action made Mr. Leonard's eyes twitch wildly, and his fists clenched tightly. But just when he was about to punch the other party, the silent Mr. Leonard suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this scene, Mr. Leonard could only sigh helplessly, then immediately took out a pill and roughly stuffed it into the other person's mouth. After taking the pill, Mr. Leonard's face looked better immediately. After a slight cough, he slowly stood up from his seat. The whole process was still silent, which made Mr. Leonard's eyes twitch wildly, and he couldn't help but complain, "Is this necessary? And you're dragging the people in this bar down with you." Hearing this, Mr. Leonard's expression did not change. He just looked at the two rookie auras lying on the table in silence and spoke calmly, "I just don't want to waste the lives of my subordinates. They can't die in vain. Besides, 2 lives are not enough to be the prelude to this drama." Chapter 403 The Simplest Happiness. The winter morning light slowly rises, and the city of Paris gradually wakes up from the night. The Eiffel Tower in the distance looks particularly dazzling under the rising sun. Its outline is looming in the morning glow, like an elegant lady swaying gently in the morning light. Along the Seine, the sun shines on the water, making it sparkle, and contrasting with the historical buildings on both sides of the river. The river is like a silver ribbon, closely connecting the ancient and modern Paris. The number of pedestrians along the river began to increase. Some of them took a leisurely stroll, while others stayed in groups of 3 or 5, watching and commenting on the tourists coming and going. Paris during the holidays always reveals a unique laziness, until the sun shines on the Champs-Élysées, the avenue known as the most beautiful street in the world. It is even more brilliant at this moment under the winter sun. Although the trees on both sides of the street had lost their green leaves, their branches form beautiful silhouettes under the sunlight. Shops on the street opened one after another to welcome customers, with all kinds of goods displayed in the windows. Lazy clerks stood at the door without any intention of soliciting customers in the meeting room on the top floor of the French Ministry of Magic. Mr. Raymond stood on the windowsill, overlooking the city waking up in the sunshine. He couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Nearly half an hour had passed since he sent Mr. Leonard and the two rookies to investigate the situation. No news had come yet, and the whole city was eerily quiet, just like every peaceful morning. He took a sip of the wine in his hand, let out a helpless sigh, and turned to look back. As a result, the sadness in my heart did not dissipate at all, but became even more intense. The scene before me was really unbearable to watch. The top floor conference room, which symbolizes the highest power of the French Ministry of Magic, has now become a special restaurant. The long table, which should have been filled with important documents, was now covered with a white tablecloth and placed with exquisite silver tablour and sparkling crystal glasses, creating a formal and solemn atmosphere. However, in sharp contrast to this solemnity are the overly greasy and formal dishes on the table. Plates of golden fried food are piled up like small mountains, and the crust is so crispy that you can almost hear the crunch sound when your teeth bite into it. Next to it is a steak fried in plenty of butter, exuding a rich, but not so fresh flavor, without any trace of the lightness and healthiness of a French breakfast. In addition, these guys got some traditional oriental dishes from somewhere that looked exquisite, but were actually heavy in taste. For example, braised pork and sweet and sour spare ribs. Although they are delicious, they seem a bit inappropriate at such an early morning. The executives who were previously dressed in strange attire have now changed into neat business attire. Sitting around the table, everyone opened their mouths wide and enjoyed the high-calorie food in front of them like a glutton. The speed at which they ate and the exaggerated shapes of the food made people who didn't know think that the French Ministry of Magic had gone bankrupt, and even the top leaders didn't know how many days they had been hungry. The air was filled with a faint aroma of oil and the sound of bottles of sparkling water being opened. After all, it is impossible to pair so much fried chicken and steak with a bottle of burgundy red wine. 2 liters of happy water is obviously a more suitable choice. Looking at these colleagues eating fried chicken with Coke, Mr. Raymond even had some doubts about how desperately these guys wanted to surrender. It is possible that it is not necessarily for the sake of family interests or personal future, but simply for the sake of being able to enjoy these high-calorie foods openly. After all, let alone those wizards who look down on muggles, even an ordinary Frenchman. As an old European Zingbeki, we don't think highly of this unhealthy diet coming from the other side of the ocean. You have to know that when these guys are in public, they are more pretentious than each other, and they are experts in all kinds of red wine and perfume. In contrast, Mr. Raymond, who only drank a glass of sherry for breakfast, became the healthiest one in the group. Would you like a piece, sir? This is top quality fried chicken, marinated with black pepper and various spices. Coat it with egg batter and breadcrumbs. Fry it in hot oil until golden brown. God has no better food than this. Looking at his leader, he was standing aside with a glass of wine, and his expression was not very good. Gerald Leroy, who had previously advocated surrender, walked up to the other party with a piece of fried chicken on a plate and made an invitation with a smile on his face. Looking at this subordinate who could be diagnosed with severe kidney deficiency without a doctor's diagnosis, Mr. Raymond could only feel his temples throbbing wildly. He stared at the other person and asked uncomfortably, "Mr. Leroy, you are a member of one of the most prominent wizarding families in the French wizarding world. Why do you like to eat this kind of food? And aren't you worried at all?" More than half an hour has passed, but the whole city is still eerily quiet, without even a sound of movement. "You worry too much." Mr. Leroy smiled indifferently and looked out the window, watching the city of Paris waking up in the sunshine. He said it in a very literary way. "What a nice day. If it weren't for all this trouble, I would have brought my violin." If you go to the Seine and set up a stall to perform, you can not only earn some money for drinks and snacks, but you may also meet some foreign beauties. I tell you, you don't have to play those classical pieces, you also have to learn some popular music. Last time I hooked up with a high school student from the United States. Of course, she is an adult. Let me tell you about her legs. Get lost. Seeing that this irrational guy had brought the topic back to women, Mr. Raymond interrupted him. An annoyance point, he waved his hand with disgust on his face and the other person returned to his seat point as a result. This guy just stood there motionless, still holding the plate forward with a smirk on his face. Have a piece, my dear minister. It's really delicious. I'm not kidding you. This thing is better than beef Wellington. There are so many strange and expensive things, and so many delicious things. This is the simplest happiness. We eat calories directly into our stomachs to please our bodies, minds and brains. Seeing that this guy was trying to pester him, Mr. Raymond had no choice but to pick up the fork on the plate point, put a piece of fried chicken in your mouth, and take a bite. When the crispy skin makes a pleasant crunch sound, point his tired and somewhat cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. Point Mr. Leroy, who was standing by, immediately said something mean when he saw this scene. Well, I didn't lie to you, did I? Enjoy it, my dear minister. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.